Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on the program today, it's our all things Latin America edition. But we're going to be focusing specifically on the country of Argentina, and who best to talk about Argentine history and current affairs than Saheli Chowdhury, who is part of Orinoco Tribune, which covers Latin American affairs and international affairs through a critical through a critical left perspective, anti-imperialist perspective. They would just simply say Chavista perspective. And yes, and Saheli's part of the editorial board at Orinoco Tribune. So first off, Saheli, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Thanks a lot. I'm becoming a fixture. Thanks a lot.
Yes, you're a returning champion, and it's great to have you back on. And just before I begin the conversation, folks, please do share widely all of One Plus One's content. Always check out the links to the guests that we invite on the program, and you can also donate to One Plus One at our PayPal. Do donate generously, but please do share widely and donate generously. That way, we can grow the channel, and in light of recent events in Syria, we really do need more independent media to counter the barrage and avalanche of propaganda that people are subjected to. So please, if you just share widely, if you just donate generously, not just to One Plus One, but also to Orinoco Tribune, we can lead. We can, galvanize a movement and have us in a much more just world. So, but yes, let's get on to talking about Argentina. So, Saheli, so my first question, when we talk about Argentina, and is what of what is it of Spanish colonialism and its legacy that still is very much alive in the body politic of Argentina?
Okay, so all it's a very interesting question because it comes at a very interesting moment. It's 200 years. Today is the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Ayacucho, which led to the liberation of the entire what is called Latin America today, but specifically the South American continent from a Spanish colonialism. This was the last terrestrial battle that took place in Ayacucho, Peru. It was, of course, it was initially headed by Simon Bolivar, no other, and you also had, but in that it was ended, or the end point was reached by another Venezuelan, General Antonio Jose de Sucre. At the same time, it was, I mean, with the participation of General San Martin, who was from Argentina. So you have the I mean, you can understand that in the anti-colonial struggle, you had participation from all those countries. It's not like the countries were separated at the time. I mean, they were, but they were all colonies. And it wasn't like the borders separated them as such. They were sort of together in the battle. What happened, the divisions came later. So, and the divisions were not even caused by specifically Spain, but if you were talking about the Spanish colonialism and its legacies, then first of all you would, apart from the erasure of indigenous cultures and entire indigenous populations, because that happened in Argentina, unfortunately, not only during the colonial period but also in the post-colonial period. And that too is a legacy, I would say, of colonialism, because with colonialism there was installed this idea, this racism, that people who came in ships, that is the Europeans, so they were of course in the higher in the hierarchy, and then others, including anyone who has, in case of Argentina, the idea of black, the idea of being Afro descendant is simply not being an African from the African continent, because at a point of time, even Spaniards, Italians, Greeks, Portuguese, they were all considered blacks because of their African ancestry. So, yes, so at the time, it's very
Wow,
interesting.
interesting. Okay.
Yes, actually, this is a specific feature in the what is called the Southern Cone, that is Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile. These three countries have this specificity that even the South Europeans, the Mediterranean Europeans, were rightly considered Africans because of their African and Asian ancestry, mostly Arab ancestry from North Africa and West Asia. But they were considered blacks. So there was a point of time when the Europeans from the north, that is Germans, Austrians, and then Scandinavians, they were considered higher up in the hierarchy for being more white. Okay, and then you have also the British, and that still exists. Will come. The British colonialism in Argentina still exists, but after that you had these Europeans, and then you had what is called the criollos. The criollos meaning the local white mixed race population, but people who are lighter skinned. So people descendant from the Spaniards, but also from Italians, because there was a larger Italian immigration in Argentina, much larger than the Spanish one. So that is why you have all these Italian surnames, all these Italian derived words in the Spanish of Argentina. Um, these people will be there, criollos, and then you had other darker mixed races, the indigenas, the pardo meaning white mixed race, black. And where did the blacks come from? They were slaves. And there were blacks in Argentina, slaves, of course, but not just slaves, but also people who fled from the neighboring countries that also had slaves. So they would go, in fact, at a point of time, it was these people who created the city and the province of Buenos Aires. And they also formed the bulk of the population, and they formed till today they form the bulk of the working class population. So you have these are colonial legacies in all our countries. That's whiter people would be richer because they held land once upon a time, and not even once upon a time meaning very long time ago, quite recently. They held land until quite recently, and they were the ones who would be in the administrative positions. They would be in the they will be the one more to be more educated, because
Yeah.
education once upon a time was not free. So if you had money, if you had land, you would be the ones who would be more educated. And only those only after that you'll come the other populations who will of course be not so much educated or be uneducated, be illiterate. They will do the manual labor. They will be the ones who will be building up the cities, but then the credit will be taken by the people who came in the ships. So that still exists to this day very much in the body politic of Argentina. In and specifically the person who rules Argentina today, the president of Argentina, is very much sold to this idea of European superiority, so much so that he acts like a servant in front of them. That's it. So this is a legacy. This legacy we had with Macri, we had, I mean, the president who was there, the right wing who was there before, but this one,
Menem.
crazy.
Yeah, like Menem, correct?
Well, Menem was a very interesting person, I would say,
Which we'll
but
talk about later. But
we can talk about him later.
in terms of the idea that that the president of Argentina is a servant and should be celebrating, it seems, Argentina's European ancestry, which has a lot of colonial baggage. So that is still alive and well, particularly, of course, when it's those more on the right of the spectrum that rule Argentina. Correct?
It's actually, yes, it's actually not just in the right wing spectrum. I would say it is sort of internalized in the society. It's not simply the right wingers, because Alberto Fernandes, who was the sort of left wing person who ruled before who was the president before Milei, he also made such a comment, a very stupid comment, which was repudiated from all sides, definitely. But he also commented that Argentinians came in ships, the Brazilians came from the forest, from the selva, he said, and say something else. Bolivians came from somewhere, from the arts, I suppose, meaning the Bolivians are indigenous. And there is this idea, in fact, if you are in Argentina and if you are a dark like you are not darker than me. So if you are in Argentina, they might call you a Bolivian, because that might think that you are from there, although you are not. Of course, you're African. You're of African ancestry, but they will think that
Well, I mean,
it just comes.
I would say as a compliment, but I would also be like, I'm not indigenous at all.
Yes, exactly. You are not Bolivian, but it is a sort of idea that a dark person is an indigenous person. A dark person, if that person also has a like a wider face and something like that, that is an indigenous person. These are sort of ideas, and the real blackness, once upon a time, blackness was so looked down upon, and not just looked down upon. It was discriminated. They were not supposed to be even in the city centers, etc. And it's not very long ago. I am telling you, it was in the post-colonial period, so in the 19th century, yes, in the 19th century, because it was Argentina was liberated by 1824. So after that, throughout the later half of the 19th century, blackness was so denigrated, I would say, that people who had black ancestors tried to hide it. They would present themselves as criollos, if especially if they were lighter skinned and could pass as mixed race. So they will pass as mixed race not with Africans, but as mixed race with indigenous, and they will pass themselves off as um indigenous white mixed races. There are different races. If you look at the censuses from those period, you will go crazy. There were like 20 mixed races like that. I'm not exaggerating. It was like that. So they will just pass themselves off. So today there are many people who do not even know that they have African ancestry, and there is also a movement, a sort of organic movement, but coming from the left, of trying to find out their own, I mean, people trying to find out their own African ancestries. Now, maybe 5, 6 generations back, if they have documents, etc., they can try to find it out.
That's fascinating. Actually, and that's actually a perfect segue to this, uh, to my second question. But I'm gonna have to add in something to my second question, which is this. Oftentimes, I don't know if you've had this experience when you talk to people who have visited Argentina, and mostly they go to Buenos Aires, and if they're of a European background or a North American background, they often they and I've heard this all the time about Argentina. They often say the following: that oh, I really liked Argentina. It's very European. To which I go, okay, well, okay, I find it such a weird statement to make and such a weird compliment to make, because it's like, well, okay. So I wanted to ask you, what makes Argentina unique compared to other parts of the Americas who strongly resemble the U.S., or those who, even if they've been badly dominated by the U.S. and its allies, still retain culturally and politically distinctions that the imperialists just haven't been able to eradicate.
Well, in case of Argentina, also, I don't think they have been able to eradicate. The problem with these Europeans or these Americans who go is not that they go to Buenos Aires, the greater Buenos Aires, for example. They do not go there. They would go to the most hip places in Buenos Aires, the most expensive places, which are actually the places that are dominated by Americans, that are dominated by Europeans, especially Northern Europeans. People Yes, people there would have German surnames. People have Nordic surnames, all sorts of Nordic surnames. People even have British surnames there. Those who live there, they might not be British today, but they had British ancestors, and you can see it from their surnames. And these are the places where they live. And even there are Americans who live there, who own land there, who own property there. So for example, if you go to very rich places like Palermo, the locality in Buenos Aires, it is a place that is frequented by foreigners. There are more foreigners than Argentinians there. So these people who tell you this thing, first of all, that is the first correction. They don't go to the Buenos Aires city. They don't go to what is called the suburban Buenos Aires or the conurbano bonaerense. They
So
don't go there.
but that means that they literally visit a country and the capital of the country, but just literally stick into their own bubbles of other tourists who most likely have the same socioeconomic background as them, which is affluent bourgeoisie and affluent, filthy rich
Yeah,
assholism.
but then, of course, if they visit other cities, for example, if they go to Cordoba, for example, which Americans also like to visit. Now, Cordoba is also a very unequal city where there are some places that very rich people live. Is a place where of the Macri family, and then you also have the slums of Cordoba, which these people will never visit. So exactly what you said, they stick to their own social class, economic class. They do not visit a country, really. They do not visit a country. Buenos Aires, the province, is very large. It's the largest, I mean, in terms of population, it's the largest province. Half the country lives there. But, I mean, not the city. The city of Buenos Aires and the province of Buenos Aires are different. The province is huge. The city is a small place in that. City is also huge, but it is a small place in the province. The province is huge. And most people do not even know that there is a city of Buenos Aires and there is a province of Buenos Aires. They might also go to
First time
Mar del
learning
Plata.
about it, so yeah.
They would also go to Mar del Plata, but they will visit the beaches. You know, they will visit the beaches. They will go on the cruise, and they will do yachting and all sorts of stuff. They might visit the waterfalls, etc. And they would never know that there is an entire city, that the Mar del Plata city was created by working class Italians. They will not know that. And they still are there. I mean, the working class people are there. Without working class people, nothing can function, right? But these people, they do not visit. They will, if they go to Tierra del Fuego, they will just go to climb the mountains. They would be not be looking at the people. But yes, there is this thing about westernization. I'm not saying that they're entirely wrong, or that these people, they're wrong. But when they say that Argentina is very western or westernized, they are not exactly wrong, because it is. The problem is that in case of Argentina, there has been a in times of the dictatorship, and we come to the dictatorship because that is the one that was mostly responsible for this sort of westernization, because it did not exist before 1970s. So after the yes, since the time of the dictatorship, and the latest one, I mean, the last dictatorship, the last civic military dictatorship of Jorge Rafael Videla, during that period, 70s, 80s. So they, what they did, they opened the country up to the IMF. It was the time that they joined the country to the IMF. It wasn't, Argentina wasn't part of that. And it also sort of invited all sorts of, I mean, I mean, Argentina was at that time, like Chile, Argentina was also a laboratory of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is not just economic reforms, it is also total social reform. So at the time of the dictatorship, the Argentinian society was totally transformed. And that, and before that, it was like, okay, you imitate European fashion. But now it not just became imitating European fashion, it just also became speaking English like the British. It also became, not just television, for example, all these things. They started to import American and European programs, just dub them in Spanish and just show them, and that became the culture. So there was a, what I said, there was a cultural colonization of Argentina, and it was recent. It wasn't very old. The cultural colonization happened in the last 60, 50, 60 years. And it was to an extent, I mean, it was to such an extent that it sort of extirpated the original Argentinian identity. Not totally extinguished, it is there, but it has been it has been sort of covered up with these imported ideas that, okay, we are modern, being westernized is considered being modern, and not building industries, not educating people. So that's the problem. So we are seeing those results now. What happened at that time, the results are we are seeing now. That's why the people who have told you that it's very Western is the very same reason why they say, I also feel like that Argentina is so westernized.
Fascinating. And that leads to the second part. That leads to this question, because there was a person, there call him an anti-hero, call him a hero of the left, call him an Argentine nationalist, if you will, but there was a man called Juan Peron who talk to anybody and you will get 100 different answers about the guy, which is why I have to ask this question, which is how should historians and leftist journalists and even leftist sociologists assess the legacy of Juan Peron and talk and when you do talk about his legacy, please talk about what are the half truths often attributed to him, to the full on fake news attributed to him, and then my only follow up question is, what did he do to be overthrown in the coup against him, the first coup against him? I know it's
Okay.
a lot, but basically, yeah, talk about like Juan Peron and so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. No. So I would say something, and this is very important. It is that after at the start, he was at the time of the beginning of the Cold War, right? So after the Second World War, and there was a lot of people accuse him of giving asylum to Nazis. The thing is this, that he did not give asylum to Nazis in particular. He gave asylum to everyone fleeing from Europe. It could be anyone. So before that, when it wasn't Peron, it was before that. The Argentinian state had a policy of giving asylum to people fleeing political persecution. It's not just the Argentinian state, it's the Mexican state, it's the Venezuelan state, it was a number of other states that had the same and still have the same policy of providing people fleeing political persecution. Of course, they will just check their backgrounds, etc., but they generally give. So Peron was not ideological about it. He gave asylum to many people. He gave asylum to the Jews being persecuted during the Second World War. He gave asylum to the persecutors who were also fleeing after the Second World
Yeah,
War.
no. And in fact, many people would be very shocked if you actually said to them, "Well, you accuse Juan Peron of anti-Semitism." Well, but no, I mean Juan Peron actually no welcomed
Everyone.
yeah, yeah.
And it was not even just political persecution. In fact, in the 20s and 30s, there was a huge Arab migration in Latin America. 20s and 30s, and then again in the late 40s, early 50s, after the creation of the Zionist entity in in West Asia. So during these times, there was also a huge Arab migration, and you will find a lot of people, the descendants of Palestinians, Syrians, Jordanians, Lebanese, Iranians, everyone in Argentina. So Argentina is very cosmopolitan. It's very diverse if you think of the lot of people who live there. And was Peron discriminating against anyone? No. Was he checking the background of anyone? No. He was just giving. Argentina is a huge country with a very small population. It isn't like they were going to create any sort of racial tensions or even worse, economic tensions. It isn't like that. So the people who actually accuse him of giving asylum to Nazis are wrong. He wasn't just checking Nazis and giving asylum, because if that were so, then Hitler could have fled there. He didn't. So, but there were others who did, and there were also, interestingly, also families who were Nazis whose children turned out to be leftists, whose children joined Che Guevara. So that is the sort of thing you have. Like families, there is everything in families. It's not, that is one half truth, a big half truth about Peron. The second half truth that I think that comes from the Western left, particularly, is that he was not left enough. What he
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So what we have to understand actually about, in case of anything outside the West, is that you simply cannot be a left and not be invested in your national question. I mean, the national question was always an important question for the left. So for Peron, it is important to be a nationalist. Now today, the word nationalism has been bastardized. It has been distorted. Its meaning has been changed, but it
And it's often
isn't like.
associated with the reactionary far right.
Yes, it's actually associated, but it isn't like that. the nationalism is of the left. So if you consider the independence movements, well, the idea of left, the idea of communism, etc., were not there, but their vision was like that. I mean, I'm talking of the independence movements of Latin America. They were thinking of equality, right? That they could not bring it about, that's a different question. But they were thinking about it. They wrote about it. Their vision was about it. They were betrayed. So the nationalism of the oppressed peoples is not reactionary. That is one thing I have to say. Nationalism of the oppressed people is actually revolutionary because that leads you to emancipation, real one. So that was Peron's another thing that is Peron is accused of being a nationalist. He was a proud nationalist. And his nationalism was making Argentina a great country, a country where everyone could enjoy the fruits of its resources. Everyone and the question of identity, he wanted to establish a question of national identity as an Argentinian, and that should also be an identity of your work. Like the work that you do, you are the work that you do, and you are the memory or your history. So you are both your history and both what you produce. People will say that these are very leftist ideas. Why is Peron accused of being nationalist? Well, he was a nationalist, but nationalism Argentinian nationalism is not Trump's nationalism. That we can safely say. And it was because of this that he was overthrown for the first time. So what were the things that he was doing? Uh, Industrialization of Argentina. Now, I'm not saying that he was the one who began the industrialization of Argentina, but he was the one who tried to expand it throughout the country, not just focus on maybe Buenos Aires, not focus on maybe Mendoza, not focus on this portion or that portion, but the fruits of the industrialization, uh, whatever you have from industrialization should go to everyone. That everyone should have a standard of living, I mean, a dignified standard of living. He also made higher education free. He was the one, it was in 1949 that he made higher education, university education free for everyone. It will be paid by the state, and anyone from any background could, I mean, who had the merit, who could enter the university will be there. So in a way, this actually opened up the Argentinian higher education sector as well as the research and industry sectors to people who are not white, people who did not have, generations of wealth behind them, who did not have land. I know and even people who were not even Argentinians. You did not even have to be Argentinian per se. The Bolivians, for example, there are Bolivians in northern Argentina. The northern provinces in Formosa, in Santa Fe, there are a lot of people who are Bolivians or mixed Bolivian Argentinians. So it's not like you have to be specifically Argentinian. You could also be a Bolivian and get this. So in a way,
Wow,
it was
that's
opening
that's
up.
incredible. That is really incredible.
So Peron really focused on education as a way of, I mean, I think it's a very middle class thing actually to consider education or higher education to be a way to step up the social ladder. So you get education, you get a good job, like you work hard, you get education, you get a good job, and you can provide a better life and economic situation to your family. So that was one would consider that that is a very basic idea that is not really revolutionary, but in the world that we live, in the world of Peron, but even today it remains a very revolutionary idea. And those who would like to continue to uh, have control over the natural resources of any country, not just Argentina, but of any country, would not want it, right? Would not like a person like this to be the president. So that was the first time. That was the reason behind his the first overthrow, that he was just being too socialist. Something that
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Stanley does not accuse him of. But he was being too socialist. He was just being too egalitarian. He was just allowing anyone to enter universities. He was just allowing anyone to board planes. Why was he doing this? So, and let's remember, Argentina is very rich in resources. So it's a redundancy. But anyway, Argentina is very rich in natural resources. It has gas. It has a lot of gas. It has oil. So oil, gas, lithium is very new. I mean, lithium, the idea of lithium is new. At the time, it was oil and gas. So Argentina has a lot of oil and gas. It also has copper. It has a lot of sea resources, like marine resources. And I'm not just referring to seafood. It is a big resource, but it is only one. It also has offshore oil in its seas, in all the islands. The reason why Britain occupies them. So, and Peron also did something that we forget these days, is that he did something that a British might have done. I'm joking, but it's true. Is that uh, he tried to create, not tried to create, but he tried to instill the idea that Argentina is not uh, territorial, I mean terrestrial country. It is actually a sort of insular country. How? That Argentina, the Argentinian shelf, the Argentinian Atlantic shelf extends into the Antarctic continent. Okay, so yes, the Argentinian shelf
Interesting.
extends to the Antarctic continent, and he instructed the geological survey, whatever you call it, the geological survey of that time, to do a survey of its Atlantic and Antarctic shelf and determine the extent, because that way the geographical extent of Argentina becomes double, because Argentina ends at Tierra del Fuego. Okay, but if the southernmost city being Ushuaia, but if you, he said that at the center of Argentina is not Buenos Aires. We have to take into account the continental shelf of Argentina, which goes into Antarctica. So if we take that region, then Argentina becomes double, and Buenos Aires becomes a northern country, Ushuaia becomes the center, and you go into the southern continent, the white continent, whatever it is called. And he was not wrong, because in 1904, it was in 1904, and since 1904, Argentina has maintained uninterrupted, uh, uninterrupted, not occupation, but maybe positioning in Antarctica. Argentina has islands in Antarctica. Argentina has Antarctic islands. So he was just trying to make this a public awareness thing. And but to remember, this region is also very rich in oil,
Yeah.
something that, and the rare earth elements, something that the US would want very much. It was for this reason that he was overthrown. He was becoming too socialist, and he was trying to educate his people about a lot of things.
And a fault. Well, that leads to this question, which is talk about which is talk about Evita Peron and the influence she had, not just on her husband, but of course the policies that they championed. So yeah, so talk a bit about her.
Okay, so if um Eva Peron is, I would say, considered probably the most influential woman in Argentina of all times, probably. If not the most influential person, she could be the most influential Argentinian of all time too. At the given the at both the admiration and the hatred she evokes in different groups, of course. So uh, you already mentioned about her influence on her husband and all these policies that this her husband had, and especially when he was in exile after his first overthrow. He was in exile in Europe, and at that time he tried to educate himself even more about what could be done, what could have led to his downfall, or what could be done better, or to avoid such things in the future. And it was in this sort of things that she had a lot of influence. And she was also someone who considered that as long as a single, not a single Argentinian, but she considered that as long as a single child in the world was going to, like, was remaining hungry, as long as a single child was not having food, then the system was failing, whatever system it is. So this was the sort of thing that she has established in the uh, I mean, all over the left spectrum in Argentina, from wherever they are, from center left to the extreme left. Uh, they actually uphold this thing that people should not be hungry, that hunger is something against which you have to fight, that poverty is something against which any nationalist, socialist government, whatever they call themselves, would have to fight. Anyone that calls themselves a peronista would have to fight against poverty and hunger, not just in children, definitely in children, but in the society in general. I would consider this as her biggest influence in politics up to this day.
That's fascinating. Then I have to ask this before we talk about Juan's return to the country, Isabel Peron, the Dirty Wars, and the Falklands War. I do have to ask this question. Now, I think most people, the reason why they have such a distorted views on Juan Peron, and why some focus way too much on him giving safe haven to Nazis, even though Canada was far worse in that respect and openly embraced the most fascistic people, whereas Juan Peron wasn't what wasn't so much a believer in corporate fascism. But I think the reason why we get all these weird distortions about Juan Perón, and not even an accurate one, like these were his good policies, these were his bad policies, and this is where he was wrong, I think comes from the fact that most people get their history of the Peróns from the musical Evita by Andrew Lloyd Webber, who did the Phantom of the Opera, and and
Ah, I didn't know this.
yes, and of course made famously into into a movie where Madonna is playing Evita, Antonio Banderas plays actually wait, no. Antonio Banderas doesn't play Juan Perón. That was done by another British actor whose name escapes me. But I wanted to read you this about that popular musical, which has a huge impact on the way internationally people across the spectrum think of the Perones, and the music, and and the musical, what influenced the musical, the script and everything, came from a book called Eva Peron, The True Story, which came out in 1996. It also it also came into a book, which which was later made into the musical with Madonna. So I'm curious. I'm curious your response on that, and have you seen and have you seen the musical, or any adaptation in which you can give a critical leftist response response to it?
Okay. I'm sorry about it, but no, I have not seen the musical nor the movie. In fact, this is news to me. I'm not saying this is news to me. I mean, I knew that they existed, but I never felt any inclination of watching them. Some people might say that this is a shortcoming on my part, or a shortcoming on my research, investigation, whatever it might be. But no, I did not ever. I'm sorry that I cannot give you a leftist or any sort of critic because I simply did not watch them, and I sometimes make it a point not to watch. Um, movies made about our historical figures. I just make it a point not to watch them because, in most cases, they are created with Western eyes and with an Western audience in mind. And it is not, the idea is not about transmitting, disseminating history or historical facts. It's more about making money, basically. And so I'm sorry that I cannot give you a critical assessment, but I will thank you for pointing this out because I did not know that this is from where people get their idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly, and also what influenced the musical was was this author Mary Main, because the musical came out in 19 in the 1970s. Funny enough, I believe 1978 was when it was officially released, and then the musical with Madonna comes out sometime after a 1996 book. So all of those apparently influence both the original musical and what Madonna, ends up doing. And that book came from Mary Main, The Woman with the Whip, which was extremely critical of Evita Peron. And that book actually came out in 1952. Sometime after her death, and it presents her in a highly critical light, and is often dismissed by Peron's supporters as lacking historical value. However, according to Wikipedia, the book was extremely popular, remains highly regarded by academics as a valuable work of journalism, and The Woman in the Whip served as a source for Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Evita.
Wow. Of course, by Wikipedia's academia, the problem with academia remains that it is a very right-wing place. Despite that me being part of academia, I am the first person to recognize it, that it remains a very right-wing place, whatever it may call itself, whatever banners and flags it may raise, it remains a very right-wing place, and it especially dislikes any leader from the left in a country that was not the West, or any leader who achieved something, or any leader who was not killed in the process. So that's a very big problem that remains, and we have to take everything with a grain of salt and with all these considerations in mind. I mean, highly regarded by academicians, and then made into a movie and say musical. I mean, that's crazy. But what can I say? People get their World War II knowledge from Hollywood films. So what can I say?
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. And now, but before we talk about Juan Peron's return to the country of Argentina, okay, let's talk about, okay, how much of an influence did the far rights have on Juan Peron? Because he did have friendly relations with Franco's Spain. He did allow some of the most, well, he allowed, yes, he did allow some of the most atrocious Nazis, like like Dr. Mengele, the Angel of Death, to come into the country. And I think he was influenced to a certain extent, not so much by Nazi Germany, but certainly to a degree Italian fascism and so forth, particularly corporate fascism. So what can you say about that? Because Juan Peron and his I'm going to butcher the name, but his party, the Justicialist
Justicialista.
Party. Sorry, folks, it's the Yankee in me. His Judicialist Party was very much a broad church that accommodated factions of the left and even factions of the right. So talk about that before we talk about his return to the country with Isabel Peron.
But so firstly, this about his party. It is very okay. So I find out that when he was in exile, actually, he has said that everyone is a Peronista. In Argentina, everyone is Peronista. That's very funny. But he said that to be a Peronista is to be a nationalist, to love your country, to want the good for your country, or to want what you believe is the best for your country. And it was not about being left or right. He said that the concept of left and right, as it is understood in Europe, or as it is understood in West, is not applicable for countries like Argentina. He said countries like Argentina, meaning all sorts of countries like Argentina. And uh, I disagree to a certain extent, but anyway, that will come later. So he said that that was not the concept. What he was taking from Italian fascism, the initiate, not what happened later, but in the beginning. And this was something actually that had influenced a lot of people all over the world was their industrialization drive.
Okay.
So, so their drive for industrialization, their drive for research, their drive for uh, just production, increasing production a lot within a short period of time using machinery. This sort of thing came to us from Europe mostly, not from the USSR at that time, because first of all, Argentina, USSR on two sides of the world. Okay. And secondly, it is that after the USSR was, when USSR was established, and then it was going through, I mean, throughout the 20s, 1920s, throughout the 1930s, it suffered through a lot of, I mean, economic upheavals because they inherited a destroyed country, a country destroyed by war, of course, but of course, centuries of stupid feudalism. So, anyways, that at the time when what they were doing, they were mostly stabilizing their country. The industrialization of the USSR happened after the 50s. On the other hand, who were inspiring the Latin Americans for industrialization in the 30s. It was the Germans and the Italians. In fact, even before that, Germany was always a powerhouse in industrialization, in investigation, in research, invention, etc. Especially, in the Industrial Revolution happened there. The European Industrial Revolution happened there. So
And I think it's also important to because a lot of people also get this wrong about immigration to Latin America. Not all Germans who immigrated to Brazil or to Venezuela or to Argentina had Nazi skeletons in their closet. Many of them were just working class to middle class folks who were just looking for a better life, and many of them very much assimilated into the body politic, which is now current Argentina or Chile or Venezuela and whatnot.
Definitely. I mean, they were not exactly all of them were Nazis. That was, I think, I highlighted that in the beginning also.
Yeah,
And what Peron liked in case of the Italian fascism was not fascism per se. He was for their scientific and industrial development. And he said that this is the model that we can import. And this is a model that we can apply. And it is not like he was the first to do that, probably not the last, because before that, the British educational model had been imported into Argentina. So the system, British system of schools and colleges, then universities, that was established in Argentina. Before that, it wasn't like, oh, they were colonizers. When we talk about Nazism, we understand it differently from Europeans in a sense that Nazism was nothing different. It wasn't something exceptional. It was simply colonialism turned inwards. It was the European colonialism turned inwards against Europeans, that's all. But it was already there. So we were already importing ideas from Europe, other ideas. It wasn't like you were importing that, or it wasn't like Peron was you know, doing some racial hierarchy. He did never did. So,
yeah,
in case of fascism, what do we think first when we think of fascism? We think of race. We think of race supremacy. That was also the idea in Argentina. That was never Peron's idea. I am influenced by their industrial and scientific uh, pioneer vision, etc. So that was one thing. Of course, one would say, but that was associated with all these, all these murders, all these racial divisions within Italy and its colonialism. The point is that at that time, you might find it funny, but or even incredible. But at that time, most of the world did not know that that was taking place. Just like today, most of the world do not know what atrocities are taking place throughout the world. They did not know that concentration camps existed. It's not. I mean, I'm not saying that it's. I mean, it's not an exaggeration, and it's not a lie. It's a historical truth. I have read documents from those periods or people's writings from those periods, from the 30s, from the 40s, especially from the 40s. Even in the 40s, people did not know that there were concentration camps in Germany. Russians knew because Germany was doing it in Russia, but most of the world did not know that there were concentration camps. These would come out later in the Nuremberg trials. This did not come out before. So you cannot just retrospectively hold someone responsible for something that they did not even do.
Perfect.
And that was one.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
I can probably just add, which you already mentioned, but it's just highlighting that every German person or every Italian person, every Austrian, every whatever, every Czech, every Ukrainian who went to South America or was Nazi, many were fleeing Nazis. Okay, so many fled from Nazis and went there. Later, the same Nazis went there also. It's not like uh, in Venezuela, for example, the Venezuelan government and also that Perez Jimenez dictatorship had had diplomatic relations with Spain. But at the during Franco, and after that, even after the Punto Fijo and democracy, the Venezuelan governments, of the golden age where everyone was a rich asshole, you said, at that time. So even
My
at that
words, yeah.
time, even at that time, they maintained relations with Franco because it was until 1970. Franco was there until 1970. So they maintained the relation, diplomatic relations, okay, and not just simply a charge d'affaires here or a consulate there. No, full diplomatic relations was maintained. Argentina also did. But at the same time, they gave asylum to the people who were fleeing from Spain under Franco. So it isn't like one size fits all, and it isn't like black and white something. So they had both. They had the relations, they recognized Franco. Whatever Franco had won in 1939, one cannot say that he lost. He won. So if he won, if he established, if he was recognized by what was the League of Nations at that time, if he was recognized by the US, if he was recognized by the whole of Europe, then what was the fault of Venezuela? What was the fault of Argentina for recognizing him?
It's very interesting, and I think that's a perfect segue to this question, which is Juan and his second wife, Isabel Peron. Now, Evita Peron had died from cancer, I believe, in the early 1950s, sadly. And Juan and his second wife, Isabel Peron, they returned to the country of Argentina, and yet the country is still unbelievably divided. There is far left terrorism happening, and there is far right state sanctioned terrorism that was happening. Why why wasn't Juan Perón able to unite the left like last time? And why did his wife, Isabel, empower the very far right forces that overthrew her husband? Because basically, when we talk about the events and the conditions that led to another coup and the far right reign of terror known as the Dirty Wars from 1976 to 83, it was Isabel Perón to her own detriment that actually empowered those very forces. So yeah, I'm curious your response to all of that.
It probably means that everybody makes mistakes, including grave, serious ones that would kill them finally. So this was something that he made. First of all, I think the Argentinian left is still very divided. Unfortunately, yes, it's still very divided. And at the time also it was divided. So when Peron came back, he came back with a vision of uniting the whole country. So you know his vision. He does not believe in left and right. So he believes that everyone is a Peronista. He believes that everyone is an Argentinian, which is true. And he is of the opinion that he can bridge the gap, build the bridges, whatever, between the left and the right, and including the far right who had overthrown him, including that. So he was a sort of there to form a government of reconciliation, of national unity, whatever you may call it. I mean, lots of countries have tried it, including Nicaragua tried it. So they were trying to build a government of national reconciliation. The problem is that you shouldn't trust them. far right, and
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, and that was the mistake of Isabel and definitely Juan Peron, but more of Isabel Peron, that she would end up making overtures to the far right forces. Peron wanted to actually, I mean, Peron also wanted to sort of reintegrate them into the political spectrum, the political field, wanted them to participate in elections, wanted them to just be part of politics and not just be far right and terrorists. He wanted all sides, both the far right and the far left, right, left, center, everyone in the world to participate in politics. The problem is exactly this, that the far right would never do that. I think I have told you many times that there is no normal right in Latin America. It's,
Exactly. And I
it's
often
always,
cite you about that because it's spot on.
I'm becoming famous. So it's always the far right. And the problem of the far right is that initially it will enter through your overtures, it will accept your invitations, it will come in, and it will mm, establish itself in the political space. And then, at the opportune moment, it will strike you and it will take over power. That has been the Latin American right through centuries, not just with Peron, but everybody has made the mistake of trying to accommodate these sort of people, including Maduro made the mistake when he allowed these sort of people to again come into politics, giving pardons and all sorts of stuff. Of course, it did not lead to any Peron sort of situation, did not lead to any coup. Mm, Simply because the Venezuelan right is not that strong. It does not have the backing of the army, for example. But in case of Argentina, that was a problem. He did not have the backing of the entire army. And of course, the left, the left of Peron, the left of Peronismo, the left of the Partido Justicialista, which is his party. So the left of that left, they, I mean, if I were there also, I would not like this sort of people being accommodated in the politics. This sort of people, I would not like to share the same space with this sort of people. It is understandable that revolutionary left would not like it, and they did not like it. They continued mm, to attack these policies of accommodation of the government, and they were correct in this regards. They were correct because they knew what was happening. Because after all, what happened? What happened? He was again overthrown, and the civic military dictatorship took over again. So it's not like they were wrong. It was more like Peron was wrong. It was a mistake, and I don't even know why he made that mistake because I don't know what he was thinking. But it seems that it was a policy of reconciliation and unity that has always failed in Latin America, always. But at that time, it was quite new. So it wasn't like everybody had tried it. Now we know that it will always fail. At that time, it was probably like, well, there are people, even in the far right, who might want to live a normal political life, who might want to be a normal political leader, who would like to govern a state and, just govern a state, participate in elections, take win or loss as it comes. There might be people like that, or you give them a chance, a second chance to repent whatever they had committed, all the crimes, etc. Come back and be part of the normal political life. That did not happen. That was a very big problem that it did not happen, and it was also the reason why the left could not be united. With when you are accommodating very, very right wing people, it's very difficult to unite the left.
Unbelievable. And I'm gonna switch. I'm actually gonna switch my questions around, which is talk to us a bit more about the far right junta and what of their legacy is still alive and well in Argentine body politics, and talk to us specifically about the judiciary and how only in recent decades have many of the far right. We see many of the far right generals being brought to justice. So talk to us about that.
Okay. So since you mentioned that these far-right generals, they are called genociders in Argentina. So the genociders being brought to justice, it's the only country where the genociders of it's the only country in Latin America, that is, where the genociders of the military dictatorships are being brought to justice. In no other country has it happened. None. They have all.
But Guatemala, though, how about Guatemala?
Well, there are only one or two. I mean, not everyone. Most of them are outside of it. Uh, there is only the one president and some of his generals who have been brought to justice, but that's all. I
Okay.
mean, most of them are not. In case of Argentina, they were trying to, or they started it. It's not like it happened today. It happened a long time ago. I mean, it started a long time ago that they are being brought to justice, and not. I mean, you cannot have Videla has died, of course, but he died alone. He died in prison, and there are others who are. I mean, the generals. Even today, there are generals who are very old, but they're still being sent to prison. Or that is the only case where elderly Argentinians can be sent to prison if you commit crimes against humanity. So um, they are being judged under crimes against humanity and not any normal law. But anyway, so let's come to the question of the military dictatorship. So you mentioned already the year 1976. So of course, with Peron's mistake, he was again overthrown, and 1976 was even worse than, I would say, the previous dictatorship in many ways. First of all, the IMF.
Hmm.
Argentina was made part of the IMF, and any country that is made part of an IMF is becoming a colony. I mean, willingly becoming a colony. So it's just becoming an economic colony. Secondly, uh, there were, until that time, land belonged to the state. So it's not like foreigners could own land in Argentina, or rather federal land in Argentina. I mean, you could housing, etc., that sort of thing can be owned, but any sort of federal land. But at that time, they made it legal to own lands, and by land, I mean forest land, national parks, lakes, beaches, things that are considered to be commons, things that are considered to be public and not belonging to any sort of private entity. But that was made, and then the, there was another very terrible law that still exists to this day because it's a legacy and a very dark legacy. Foreign corporations and uh, the small businesses, small, medium businesses, small, medium industries, and foreign corporations, multinationals, were all considered to be the same, to have the same rights, no sort of particular protection to your national industry. The protection for national industry was removed. That was some.
Is that very similar to Peru or even in the United States where a
Has rights.
corporation is considered a
A
legal
person.
personhood and whatnot. So
Yes.
corporations literally have the exact same rights and hypothetic, as you or me, except when it comes to crime and punishment, but that's another issue altogether.
Yeah. So yes, yes. Actually, corporate personhood was became something in Argentinian law. It did not exist, and it does not exist in most countries. In most countries, corporations are not people. In most countries, corporations are not legal persons. But in Argentina, they were made into legal persons, and not even that. The corporations would have the same rights under Argentinian law as the national companies, or even the small and medium scale industries. So, small and medium scale industries do not have their money, they do not have their power, they do not have their resources, they do not have foreign backing. Now they have lost the state backing as well. And this legacy continues to this day. It could not be changed in the 1994 constitution either. I mean, the 1994 constitutional convention could not change it, and even today it has not been changed. But from that, there was also the de facto dollarization of the Argentinian economy. So Argentina remains a bi-monetary country. It's not like dollar is the currency. It's not Ecuador. It's not El Salvador. But it has the problem that the Argentinian peso is very much linked to the US dollar. So its price, this is a problem in all countries in Latin America, that the prices fluctuate with the fluctuation of the US economy, not even the US dollar, but the US economy. Now,
In other in,
as
in other words, whenever the U.S. economy is doing well, and I would even argue when the hell is the U.S. economy doing well, but and whenever the U.S. economy is really not doing well, America sneezes. Countries like Argentina catch a very nasty cold, right?
yes, yes. So, and that of course would raise the prices of everything. And then another thing was happening. That was large scale agriculture, and that large scale agriculture was given the right to sell their products first in, I mean, wherever they get the price. I mean, at one point of time, the agriculturists in Argentina, and remember, Argentinian agriculturists are not like individuals, they have companies, agricultural companies, very similar to the US. So at a point of time, they had to first sell in the national market, and only then would they sell internationally. This law was also changed in the dictatorship, and it has remained like that. It wasn't changed in 1994. So uh, this law means that if they think that they will get higher prices elsewhere in foreign markets, then they will do that, and that has exactly happened. Every time Argentina reported an economic superavit or something like that, that is more greater production than demand, what happens is that in case of, well, they do not really sell anything in the country first. They would first send it to whoever buys it, like China. It could be any country, any countries in Asia. It could be countries in Europe, and only then they will be selling their agricultural products inside the country, including meat. And in case of Argentina, meat is a very important part of their diet. So if you are selling off your products elsewhere first, it also means that you are not being able to, you might not be able to cover the demands in your own country. And that means that prices of the products, of the food, will rise. And this has remained always, has remained a problem since the time of the dictatorship. But then again, I mean, it never stopped. Still remains a problem. Food prices in Argentina are exorbitant because of this reason. It's always remained exorbitant compared to all its neighboring countries. So these were the legacies, I would say. I forgot about the Parana River. They also made the Parana River an international waterway, which means that, I mean, not I mean, it was always an international waterway, but what they did was that they gave tariff benefits to foreign companies, foreign businesses. It means that British, US, Canadian, Swiss, and all sorts of companies that, and particularly this, with those which Argentina has free trade agreements and stuff like that, the businesses from those companies, or the shipping line owners from those companies or those countries, they do not have to pay high tariffs, or they pay a low tariff. I mean, they have tariff benefits, which means that the Parana River has become, actually, I mean, it no longer remains a property of Argentina, the Argentinian state. It has become, or not even a property of the Argentinian people. It has become private property at the moment.
Unbelievable. And very quickly, have most of the victims of the grotesque human rights abuses that the far right junta did, one of the things they did, the Chileans did, but I believe even the ones from Uruguay did, was taking the children of the people that they murdered or disappeared and giving them to the relatives of
Religion.
the relatives and the cronies of of the right wing junta. Have many of those families been able to reunite, or is that still an ongoing process?
It remains an ongoing process. I think most of them have not been able to reunite. they have all these, they have all these platforms, all these organizations that are trying to find the children and even the grandchildren of these people and trying to reunite with their original families. And uh, the problem is that the Argentinian state has not declassified the military archives from that period. No government has done it to this day. So, yeah, no, not even Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. They did some, but they did not. The demand that exists from not just from the left, from the society, is the declassification of the files from those periods. So if they do, then that process might become easier. What people can do now, what these organizations can do now, is that they can, at the moment, there is this current government is a denialist. But
Yeah.
before that, they could that to apply and then get the particular, specific documents from the state archives, the national archives, and then they could try to connect these people. Or there are also people who, you know, who believe who know or who believe that they had been adopted, and they deposit their DNA. There is a DNA bank for that, and they deposit their DNA, and then these organizations which are trying to find these people, they would just try to match their DNA with the available DNA if they have from those families, and see if there is a match and try to relate these people. But this is a very it's an ongoing process, and we don't know when it will end actually, because there is in Argentina there is a registry of 30,000 disappeared people, and many of them had either they had children, either they were disappeared with their children, or many women were disappeared when they were pregnant. So their children might have been born in prison, and we do not know what happened. If they were born properly, if then they were, if the children were born, then they were removed, and where they went, if they remained, all of them remained inside Argentina, or if some people took them away to some other countries, etc. So there might always remain an uncertainty about it too. But they're trying to do it, they were correct, they're trying to do it in Chile, in Uruguay, in Argentina, both all three countries that had all the same problem.
But that says a lot about the legacy of the far right junta when we talk about the judiciary, right?
Yeah, I forgot the name because it has a place in its own right. So I think this is also something that I have said many times, is that the judiciary is the most difficult branch of the state that you can reform. So it's
In
always
all Latin American countries.
yes, all Latin American countries, it's very difficult to reform for any progressive government. So in case of in case of Argentina, what happened during the military was that the judiciary was militarized. So all cases would be in military courts. There were what is called civil courts, but most cases would go to military courts. Any sort of political cases would go to military courts, etc. Today, the people who are in courts, that the idea of judiciary still remains. So currently the judiciary, it has been called a judicial party. It acts like a political party at the moment, and it acts like a very right-wing political party. So that is also a legacy of the what I call the judiciary, the Argentinian judiciary, is that it became that sort of dictatorial, and it remains with the idea of the dictatorship, not about maybe not physically disappearing people, but disappearing people politically. And this has been the case, especially the case against left-wing leaders in recent years. Um, Cristina Fernandez being the biggest example of it. I don't know. There are so many cases against it, maybe 10, 12 cases against her, and none of them has a proof, or the proof or evidence are on very shaky grounds. And yeah, many of them are so
So
ridiculous.
what we
So
call
ridiculous.
lawfare, right?
Yes, it's a lawfare. It's a lawfare against her, and not just against her, but against many of her officials and people who were close to her, or not even just close to her. For example, there was this case about a businessman uh, who she apparently illicitly enriched. She didn't, because she was the president at that time, and it's not the president who does the tenders or administers the tenders or orders, reconstruction, anything. No, this is something that Westerners do not understand. That think that our presidents have all the power in the world, but that's not true. This sort of things,
Yeah.
infrastructure and that sort of things. Yes, the president allocates the budget, but that budget has to be approved by the parliament. So in case of Argentina, it's two houses, like the Congress and the Senate. It has to be approved in both, and only then can it be approved. The budget is approved. The budget is not just given away by the president at his or her own free will. So this sort of thing people don't understand, and they're the ones that to call these people, I mean, the call people like Cristina Fernandez thief, while the real thieves are enjoying themselves quite a lot. So yes, the lawfare is also a legacy um, of the dictatorship. And there is another thing that is also the legacy of the dictatorship is the media. I forgot to tell you about it, but that's always a big, big legacy. But you might have a question about it, so I did not say it.
No, 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 no. Actually, please go into that before I do. Before I ask about the Falklands War, please do talk about that.
So, in during the dictatorship, I think I told you about the cultural colonization a bit earlier. And how did this cultural colonization come about? So, in Argentina, yes, it's true that media was always in the hands of, I mean, it is true in any sort of oligarchic economy that the media would be concentrated in the hands of a few, especially once upon a time, it was the same people who owned the newsprint companies, or who were in logging businesses. So in case of Argentina, it was also true. So people who were in logging, people who were in newsprint, people who owned printing presses. So they were the ones who also owned the press, the published press.
Yeah.
Now, in case of during the time of the dictatorship, those who aligned themselves with the dictatorship, they were allowed to keep their things. Those who did not, they were disappeared. Their businesses were supposedly taken over by the state, but they were actually shared, given over to these newspaper owners who were close to the dictatorship. So during the dictatorship, there was even more concentration, a greater concentration of news media in the hands of the people. I mean, in the hands of this sort of people who were close to the dictatorship. And after the dictatorship ended, and with the supposed advent of democracy, this thing was not changed. Alfonsine, Menem, they did not care about these things. The people who were supporting, I mean, the news outlets who were supporting the dictatorship, no, they were supporting Mr. Alfonsine. No, they were supporting Mr. Menem. So they did not have any reason to change this structure. The media remained right wing, the government was right wing. So there was no reason for the government, from the government points of view, it was not a priority. In fact, it was a priority to maintain the structure. So they maintained the concentration. And at the same time, there was also what is called the transnationalization of Argentinian media.
Yeah.
There is, there is the biggest media house in Argentina is Clarín. Now, during the dictatorship, Clarín was a media house. During democracy in the 90s, the time of neoliberalism, Clarin not only was a media house, it also got radio, it got television. I mean, it got a lot of radio time, it got a lot of television. And then with the advent of the internet, it got broadband. So it gave people broadband connections. Okay.
Wow.
So it was not just, it is not, I'd say that Clarin is not a media, it's an empire. And it's true. Clarin is an empire. Uh, Clarin is only one, but it is the biggest. There is also La Nación, and there is also Telefe Noticias, and all these things, but they are smaller. They are children compared to Clarin. Mm. The problem is that this Clarin, etc., it's not that they are simply media. They have become corporations and transnational corporations. So its board of directors or its owners are not only Argentinians, There are also foreigners in its board of directors. And what happened is that these were the ones during the 90s, they were the ones who were also bringing in, you know, uh, I mean, they were the ones who were signing agreements, etc., with US media owners like Comcast, Fox News, like all this, all the ones that own the media in the US. So there are 6, 7 media houses in the US. They Disney, etc. So these ones they had agreements with them, and they imported the US media model into Argentina, and this is also a reason for the supposed westernization of Argentina. No other country has this sort of thing. I mean, yes, there is Univision, there is EFE, they're all like speaking 24/7 into people's ears, but a country, government signing agreements with US corporations and to bring their media corporations into a country, that's a very rare thing. That's a very unique thing in Argentina. And this sort of transnationalization gave media a lot of power. You tell me, who are they responsible to? Who do they answer to? No one. Right? Transnational corporations, they do not answer to anyone. They are not bound by any law. In case of
That's
Argentina,
and
it become
and does that explain why Juan Peron still has a very distorted legacy in the minds of sometimes the average Argentinian from a middle class background? Why you have this? Why you don't get a fair, accurate assessment of Juan Peron, and also why even if a left government does get elected, why there still is a lot of hostility towards that left government. Best example is I've told you, Jesus and Joe, about this before. I there's this Argentinian girl I knew in at my school ISB who was she was certainly fairly left leaning. But when I asked her about, so how's Cristina doing in Argentina, her response is, I don't know, Youri. The only thing the only thing the Argentinian media ever talks about when it's Cristina is her shoe collection.
yeah. Yes, actually, there has been a this it is this media that has banalized politics. So it does not. If you listen to any Argentinian media, and I'm not just talking about Telefe or Clarín, I'm also talking about so-called left Argentinian media like C5N. They are most of them do not. First of all, they do not discuss geopolitics, never. Mm, their all their foreign news, international news, comes from translating, copy pasting whatever is AP or you know AP,
Yeah, the
AFP,
Associated Press.
etc. Yeah, you know. So it's Associated Press, what AFP is saying, maybe what EFE is saying, what CNN. Oh, so this sort of thing. So they will just, if it's an English media, they will just translate it and they'll read it out. And if it's EFE, like Spanish media, then they don't even have to translate. They will just read it. So their foreign news comes from foreigners. Their foreign news, they do not have foreign correspondents. They have a lot of money, but they do not have foreign correspondents. So their international news. And you cannot think of a country without its geopolitics, right? Or its position in the global geopolitics. So it's Argentinians do not really get a view, or not even of their countries. Like a child disappears and it is in the news headlines for a few days and then it vanishes, and they just start talking about some celebrity. So of course they would not talk about Christina's good things, whatever good things she has done, whatever her achievements. They would not talk about her achievements. Oh, they would talk about all this lawfare. And it is in fact, in the courts, it was Clarin's accounts that were used as evidence against Christina. It was so funny. Once upon a time, not today, but in the 90s, I mean, there were some yes, yes, there were bombings in Argentina against against Israeli embassy and places like that.
Yeah,
You know about it in 1996, etc. And those
Allegedly
things,
blamed on Hezbollah and whatnot. So yeah.
they were blamed on Hezbollah and IRGC, that is the Islamic Republic Guards Corps of the Iran. And it was Clarin's accounts that were used in courts against Iran, against the government of Iran, that it was the one that had financed these things, etc. Funny thing is this, that the case did not take place in Argentina. Okay, of course, it's an international case. So it took place in The Hague, the International Criminal Court, and the International Criminal Court dismissed all those evidence. So nobody's so that case was dismissed. The entire case was dismissed because of this. So and
Crazy.
the Argentinian state had to pay compensation to Iran for defamation. You know, and you remember, it is not like, and it was a time of Cristina Fernandez that this case was finalized. And it isn't like she was there making that case or doing anything about that case. It's the case of the state, right? One has to remember the state is not government. So when you come to government, you get all the legacy of the state, all the baggage of that state. So you also have that case of this, and that case was dismissed in the International Criminal Court because Clarin's news was used as evidence. So
Well,
you can
I
imagine.
have to ask. I have to ask this question, but respond briefly to it because I think we could do a whole entire show about the Falklands War. But I have to ask a question about the Falklands War, which was the following. Now, if you can briefly talk about the Falklands War, just answer this question: why wasn't Argentina able to take the Malvinas back from Britain? And was there bitter divisions from the global South uh, about the war? In other words, were there a lot of Latin American countries who supported Argentina against the UK, which is closely aligned with the godfather of all of them, which is the US, and 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 with and with that, did the US more or less support Britain because the US itself has many overseas territories, what are known as what are known as colonies. So I'm curious your response on that when we talk about
Okay,
Falklands War.
first of all, Malvinas. Okay, so we don't call it Falklands. So it's um, first of all, the Malvinas was taken over by the Britain. It has been 193 years, so that Britain took it over. As, and at that time, Argentina could not, of course, take it back because Argentina was a newly independent country. So it's just 200 years, 193 years. It's like 7 years into its independence, its land was taken away. It has a very strategic position, of course. That's why Britain took it. You can understand at that time it was the passage, through the Strait of Magellan, from the Pacific to the Atlantic and then to the Indian Ocean. And it is also a geostrategic position when you think of Antarctica. At that time, they were not thinking about it, they're thinking later. As for why US supports it or supported Britain at that time, it's simply that it is a NATO base. It's not simply a British colony. Yes,
Ah,
the Malvinas is a British colony, but there is a NATO base in Monte Agradable in the Malvinas, and who is the godfather of NATO? The US, right? So how can it let such a base fall into the hands, and in a strategic position to fall into the hands of a vessel state like Argentina, which is not even. In 1982 there was a different problem. I mean, it was still, Argentina was still a dictatorship. I mean, it was still in the dictatorship. So when the dictatorship went to war, uh, in a way of legitimizing itself, so it wanted support, it was lacking support, it will just fall the next year, right? So by
but
1982 it was already
well,
lacking
regardless, but that's sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important to say, regardless of what kind of a government was in place in Argentina, you have to be on the side of Argentina because it is just so clearly like, come on, like the Malvinas clearly that is clearly Argentine territory, and what business does a small country like England, an island nation, have to have an overseas territory, a colony, whether it's Gibraltar in Spain or the Malvinas in Argentina, or even countries like Diego Garcia, and the fact that the Queen is no, not the Queen, the King Charles is still the head of state in most of Britain's supposedly ex-colonies. I think it's important to say that, but yeah,
Definitely, no, no. The thing is this, that the countries of South America did support Argentina, not because of its government, of course. The government went to war because of that. It was already the government, I mean, whatever government was, Argentinian state was already trying to take Malvinas back. It still does. And so the other idea was to take it by diplomatic means, to take it back peacefully, to make Britain live. But of course, it won't live, you know. But still, the idea is that to reintegrate back peacefully. And there are such it's a precedents. For example, Hong Kong. So the 99-year lease. Britain likes its 99-year leases. So the 99-year.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But despite the 99-year lease, I mean, that lease ended and Hong Kong is reintegrating back into China. So uh, these precedents were already there. The Malvinas case was already in the Decolonization Committee of the United Nations. Yes, it has a committee on decolonization. Many people forget about it. And Malvinas is one of the cases there, as is Gibraltar, as is the Sahrawi Republic, and as is Palestine. So all these are in the Decolonization Committee of the United Nations. So it is these cases are considered as colonialism. And in 1973, I think, or maybe 77, I'm forgetting, but in one of these years, uh, the Latin American state signed a treaty of zone of peace, considering Latin America as a zone of peace, free of nuclear weapons. So when Britain was in 1982, when Britain sent a nuclear powered submarine to Malvinas, the Latin American countries, irrespective of their relation with the government of Argentina, was against it. So they did support they always supported Argentine claims for Malvinas. It is not a question of government. Sometimes it seems, for example, in case of Milei, who is so servile to Britain, even in this case, it seems that other countries support the Argentinian claim more than the Argentinian government itself. So at that time also they supported. It's not like they didn't. And that was what created this bitter division between the North and South of America. So you had the US that supported Britain because it is a NATO base, it will like to save it, and also because Britain is UK's ideological brother, its predecessor, whatever way you like to call it,
Exactly.
and they would like to maintain their strategic position there. So Malvinas were the problem was that Argentina did not and does not have the military capability to take over Malvinas because it is not just Britain occupying it, it's NATO occupying it. And there are so many countries in NATO with the US, the biggest military power in the world. Uh, Argentina
Well,
does not.
that's fascinating to know, because basically, when Argentina went to war with Britain, they actually basically went to war with
NATO. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
wow, incredible. That's wow. That is incredible.
People forget that the Monte Agradable base is a NATO base. Argentinians forget it too. It's not a British base, it's a NATO base. Just like Diego Garcia, you mentioned Diego Garcia in Chagos Islands. Chagos Islands was recently handed back to Mauritius with a 99-year lease on Diego Garcia, right? Because there is a US naval base there. The same is the problem with Malvinas. In fact, I'm afraid, I was telling a friend of mine that even if, since this precedent exists, Britain might sign you back the Malvinas, but will keep Monte Agradable, the military base, and it will be used against all countries of Latin America.
And then the irony also is that Britain actually supported the far right military junta takeover of Argentina, and then the same government goes to war with Britain over a territory which I think clearly belongs to Argentina. I mean, you really have to be a British nationalist and a dyed-in-the-wool imperialist to say that Britain has any claim over the Malvinas or Gibraltar. But that leads to the fall though of the far right military junta. Now, quickly before talking about the legacy of Fernando De La Rua and his radical civic union, uh, what long-lasting trauma and effects did the loss of the Falklands or Malvinas have on the Argentine public?
Okay, so it is probably one of the issues that unite the public in a country that may be polarized. So
Interesting.
even people who support Milei consider Malvinas to be Argentinian. Milei also does. He says that he does. He did not say that he does not. So he says that
Yeah, but he's
he
a
probably
bootleg. Yeah,
thinks.
he's a bootlegger for global like fascist capitalists. So, like, but like, yeah, for him, like Falklands, like it's expendable for him because like
Oh, he has no problem that Britain continues to occupy it. He knows that it is Argentinian land. He does not have problem with Britain continuing to occupy it. Okay, so but it is considered to be, first of all, it's considered to be Argentina by everyone in Argentina. It has to be a very like brainwashed person to consider it British. Britain, by the way, claims, and this is so funny that I have to mention it. Britain claims that it has right to self-determination in Falkland, Malvinas. But yes, it's so
yes,
funny that I have to mention.
because of the many British inhabitants, and funny enough, the British inhabitants of Malvinas voted overwhelmingly to stay in the European Union.
So they claim that they have a right to self-determination there. That's a big problem that the Argentinian state cannot hold a vote there. Argentina has a governor for Malvinas. He's from Tierra del Fuego and Malvinas, but of course, it's just a governor. It's not de facto. It's governed by Britain. Anyway, so it's called Tierra del Fuego, Malvinas, and the Antarctic Territory. Anyway,
Unbelievable.
so uh,
Unbelievable.
the, the thing is that from that time, the soldiers who went to the war, not only those who died, but those who survived, for a long period of time, there was a lot of PTSD that wasn't taken care of by the state. By 1983, the government had fallen. I mean, the military government had fallen. The new government, first of all, Raul Alfonsín came, and then you had Menem, but none of them, and forget about De La Rua, none of them paid any attention to these people. So PTSD meant that a lot of them took their lives, sadly,
Yeah.
and there are others, and it was only after this that they made organizations in order to for self-support. But these organizations today not only support each other or the rights of the combatants. They call themselves, of course, ex-combatants of Malvinas. Yes, they don't just call themselves soldiers or anything. They are ex-combatants of Malvinas, and there are also conscripts. So there is an organization of the conscript ex-combatants of Malvinas too, and these people try to try to advocate for their case, not for their case but for Malvinas. They try to advocate for the reintegration of Malvinas into Argentina by diplomatic means, because Argentina cannot win in a war. By diplomatic means, not just Malvinas, there are also other Antarctic islands that are forgotten, the South George and South Sandwich Islands, which are in the Antarctic region. So they're also occupied by Britain. These things, the reintegration of them, and they do these advocacy things, so not just inside Argentina, but also at the UN, at all sorts of multilateral instances that they can, in civil society, not only in Argentina, but also in Britain, in US, in all sorts of countries that have an interest in maintaining British occupation in Malvinas. So they have from a social, or rather, self-help organization, they have become a political sort of force, or social political force, a social movement, whatever you might call them, even nationalist movement, because it's not like they hated their country. They may have disliked their government, but they do not hate their country, and they want the territorial integrity of Argentina to be maintained, or to be restored, rather. This is, but today, I would say that in books, etc., it is called Malvinas. And recently, when the government of Milei just sent out a statement with calling Malvinas Falklands, there was uproar from all sides, including from inside his party. So Malvinas, I would say, is an issue that unites people. If you go to Argentina, if you go to the national parks, in each national park, you will find uh, a board, a banner, whatever, a signboard. So you'll find a signboard with the map of Malvinas and the distance from that location to Malvinas. In order to, it's a sort of public awareness. It was done at the 40th anniversary of the Malvinas War in 2022, uh, in order to keep the memory of the Malvinas alive in people's minds, not just the memory of Malvinas, but its importance in the Argentinian body politic in the country, etc. So these are the legacies, I would say, that the positive legacies that still exist regarding Malvinas.
Un- Unbelievable. And later it would, and later, of course, Britain may have won the Malvinas War, but came back to haunt them because when there was the football match between the World Cup football match between Britain and Argentina, Mexican coach claimed that he didn't see that famous handball of Argentina, but I leave viewers to imagine what I'm insinuating. So, all right. Talk to us briefly about the legacy of Fernando De La Rua and his Radical Civic Union Party. He was the first democratically elected government of Argentina after the fall of the far-right junta. Talk to us. So talk briefly about his legacy, if you can.
Okay. So let's remember, De La Rua was elected twice. I mean, once he became after 1983, in 1983, and then again when he had to flee in 2000. Let's remember that as well. So, yeah, Argentina. So we will talk about Argentina. But firstly, we'll talk about the 1983. So in 1983, it was, let's say, it was a handover of power by the, he oversaw a handover of power by the dictatorship because it was unsustainable at the time. And they handed over the power to his civic union. And initially, the idea of his party was also similar as a national unity. Let's talk about it. He talked about a reconciliation. He talked about a national unity, but in that, the generals, the genociders, they were let off. They So, for the sake of reconciliation, the genociders were not taken to court. For the sake of reconciliation, he signed the agreement of not disclosing or declassifying the military documents from that period. That is also a legacy that still exists. None of them have been declassified, and I would say that he could be called mm, the father of the new democracy, etc. in Argentina. But new democracy was just like old democracy. New was same as the old was. So he did not change any of the laws.
Yeah.
He's
No. I think it's the best way to actually sum up his legacy and his time in power because the inequalities are still there. The far right junta literally got away with all of their crimes against
Humanity.
humanity, and yeah, and that very European system imported into Argentina of the haves and have-nots are still very much are still very much there. And is it safe to say that he also laid the groundworks for Carlos Menem, and of course, and his regressive neoliberalism period?
Yes. So he changed nothing. And what else he did? He changed none of the laws. The laws that I said, the laws that the dictatorship had changed, he changed none of that. Everything was same. It was just no longer a military system. It will just be a so-called democratic system. There will be election every 4 years, or rather every 2 years, because there is also midterm elections. Those things were done by him. So you can call that, yeah, it's a return to democracy, but it was very similar to Spain, the return to democracy of Spain after Franco. So it was very similar in Argentina. And, and he also led the groundwork for neoliberalism. Neoliberalism was a legacy of the dictatorship. It was nothing new. But during the dictatorship, it was more like an experiment on Argentina. During his time, so okay, foreign corporations are coming, they are investing in Argentina. It's very fine. Let them invest without any problem. He even I would say liberalized even more economic and financial laws. And these companies could get credit lines without the mediation or the intervention of the Argentinian state, because he wanted to make a small state. This is something that libertarians say, actually, small but efficient state. So that was his idea. And that
That
was
protects your civil liberties, but when corporations violate your economic rights
liberties. No,
and
no,
your
no,
civil
no.
liberties, we protect the corporations.
Corporations, yeah, corporations are legal persons. So they do not really protect anything. And that was, of course, that led to Menem, that led to Alfonsine, and then Menem, all of them the same. And Menem is even worse because he used Peronista language to come to power. He called himself of the left. He was supported by the Justicialista Party. And he
I
came to
believe he
power.
was even a member of the party, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was
Yeah.
a member of the party. He was the candidate of the party. He was supported by a lot of people on the left. And after he came to power, he showed his true colors. And for example, the transnationalization of media happened under Menem. He had no problem with the transnationalization of media because it was supporting him. He had no problem with the flight of capital from Argentina. That's also a very common theme in Argentina. He had no problem with the flight of capital from Argentina, with the rich business owners going to tax havens and storing their money in tax havens. He was just giving them tax breaks, and the tax breaks were going to be accumulated in tax havens. It's not like the tax breaks did anything in the national production. So I'd say Menem deindustrialized Argentina, basically. It is not the dictatorship, it was Menem.
And actually, also the first major Argentine financial crisis, the collapse of the banks, which was a warning to the world about letting banks and other financial institutions from running roughshods on us, wasn't the economic crisis that happened in Argentina basically a warning sign that 2008 was just around the corner unless we finally put a lid on how much control the banks have and the issue of commercial banks merging with investment banks and whatnot.
Yes, actually, exactly, because the problem with neoliberalism is that it does not produce anything. So the production of the manufacturing, it is just goes to the back foot, and you are just talking the banks, everything are becoming like speculation. So uh, it was starting from the 90s that this share market, these indices of the share markets, these things started to come into the society where, and they are being normalized in society. It's not like, "Oh, we want to know about it, anything. It's just a thing of rich people." It no longer was like that. It was made into part of the economy. It isn't. I mean, it does not produce anything. It's just speculation. It is just taking capital from here to there, round and round without producing anything in between. But still, it was made. Finance and speculation was made into a part of the economy and a big part of the economy. Production decreases, everything is decreasing. What should be a real economy? And this was something that led to what you were talking about, Argentina. So, first of all, the fall of the banks, and let's talk about it. It was Fernando De La Rua who was the president at that time when Argentina so happened in 2000, not even very far away, just 24 years away. So 24 years ago. Anyway, so of course, he had given the banks so much power and of this financial speculators so much power. They still have a lot of power in Argentina. At that time, they were having so much power, and they did not have anything. I mean, they were not producing anything. So if there was a crisis, then who would be saving them? They were banking on the state to save them. That the state would take loans from IMF and would give them that loans, and they will save them. Something that Macri also did. So, but at that time, with the crash of the banks, that did not happen. IMF did not at that time. IMF did not give him loans, and Fernando de la Rua had to flee on a plane. It's a very famous image that he had to flee his country on a plane, and you then had 5 presidents in a week. It's a record.
Yes, that did happen, and it's actually it's funny how we even forget that that was Fernando de la Rua, because his time in office, which was the entire 1980s, and I think a lot of us focus way too much on Menem. That's the fault of the left. A lot of us focus way too much on Menem, but we also forget that De La Rua was also part of the mess, and he had to flee because something close to a revolution was basically about to happen in
It
Argentina.
happened. It happened. The revolution happened. That's why he had to flee. I mean, if you wanted to, I don't think they were going to kill him, but his forces, I mean, the security forces killed 44 people. Killed 44 people. The youngest were 13-year-olds, two children. So in this situation, like there will be a revolution. So it was just 2 days, and then he had to flee. He did basically flee, and from outside he resigned and said that he's resigning, giving over power, and then. Of course, after the president comes the vice president, because there is a line of succession. So the vice president, then the vice president could not remain. Then it was the president of the Senate. He could not remain either. And in this way it goes until Duhalde could hold power for 2 more years. And then he would go to the election of
And
Nestor Kirchner.
throughout all of this crisis comes a new left, center left, but a left nonetheless, and that is and that is the Kirchners. So, how do you assess the legacy of Nestor Kirchner and his wife Christina, and why we on the left, regardless of whether we call ourselves social democrats or communists or Trotskyists and whatnot, why we should verbally defend them against those who say they're corrupt just like the rest of them.
So first of all, those who say they're just like the rest of them, they never governed anything. That's one thing that is true for all of these people. They never governed. Okay, so they do not know what are the points of governing. But why do people remember Nestor Kirchner? Why were people crying when he passed away, right? So yeah, I mean his funeral was attended by millions. Why? So and it's not without reason. People who is a person who is just like everyone would not be remembered in this way. First
Unless
of all,
unless the people are forced to mourn him, like like Brian Mulroney, or Alberto Fujimori, who had a state funeral. Like people were like, let's be honest, anyone who went to those funerals were forced to go to those funerals and must have taken something to make themselves cry, because nobody is crying tears of sadness over the passing of Alberto Fujimori and arguably Brian Mulroney. But anyways,
well, someday we might talk about Peru, and Fujimori has a very. I mean, I don't know. There are still people who actually like him. So, and now they are not all right wingers. I mean, at that time, there were many who believed that Fujimori had stabilized the country from the terror of Senderolo. So, but we won't talk about it today. We're talking about Argentina.
Yes.
And
Claudia
so,
O'Brien Moscoso owes me an episode, so yeah, no problem. But yes, the Kirchners.
the
Safe to,
Kirchner, what
I mean,
happened to
I
him?
mean, the Kirchners. It's safe to say that they ended. Well, they more or less ended austerity. They ended the reign of terror that was neoliberalism running roughshods around the country, but they also ended the practice of austerity to fix the mistakes of the banksters and other, capitalist crooks and whatnot. Safe to say, right?
So it was before AMLO that Nestor was supporter of the Republican austerity or the state austerity, in the sense that not austerity for the poor, not austerity for the people, but austerity for the state. So he would not he was a real Peronista in that sense, that he will be bringing back free education. He is bringing back all the food services, like food given to people from for free of charge. But his biggest legacy would, of course, be ending the instability in Argentina created by all these neoliberal presidents who just did not know what they were doing. I mean, they probably knew, but they did not know where it would lead to. It led to total destabilization. It led to 5 presidents in a week. So that sort of instability was ended by Nestor Kirchner. He was someone who also saved Argentina for a long time from the clutches of IMF. He renegotiated with IMF. At the time, Argentina had a tremendous unpayable loan with the IMF. So Nestor Kirchner's government would sit down with the IMF to renegotiate it, to discuss. There were illegal loans. There were also loans that were just taken, and then nobody knew what happened with them. So what he tried to do was get rid of those illegal loans, and only those loans that came into the state that were used in infrastructure, only those loans will be paid, and without any surcharges. That was the thing. So sometimes, not sometimes, IMF will always charge you surcharges when you are paying back, not just interest, but also surcharges on the interest. So he said that no, we will not be paying anything. If you take what we are paying, then take it, or you go. We are not, we are not afraid of defaulting. And he defaulted. IMF did not wish to. IMF did not wish to lose his money. So Mr. Kirchner had the courage to default. They said that a government will not pay. What will you do? Will not pay. So he did not pay. What did IMF do? IMF said we'll freeze all your investments in IMF. So in IMF you have a special drawing rights. All countries who are members of IMF, they have a deposit. It's sort of like a current account that you keep there. And when you are, of course, whenever you wish to take it out, you can. It's not like a fixed deposit, it's like a running thing. So you can take it out. But IMF imposed a sanction on Argentina that it won't be able to draw its special drawing rights. IMF also stopped all other, let's say, credit lines that exist, like the Bank of America, the Development Bank of America, and all sorts of things, all these sort of credit lines, they stopped giving Argentina any loan. So there was at the time, a huge propaganda that the Argentinian government would fall, that it won't have any money. And let's remember, it was 2000. It wasn't like there was a USSR to fall back to. So it was a special period. The fact that Nestor Kirchner could guide Argentina through those years, that would be his biggest legacy, because he not only got rid of IMF, no, I maybe after a point of time, it turned out that there were countries that were paying him Argentina stuff. There was Russia, there was China, who started doing business with Argentina on, let's say, on friendly terms, and not just friendly. They got some benefits, of course, beneficial terms with Argentina, and they knew that Argentina had the products. Argentina was an agricultural producer. They needed the food. So they would be importing it, and instead they will be giving Argentina credit for doing stuff. And they would only want their companies to be the ones getting the tenders, getting the basically getting to do these things. And that was how Argentina's relation with China and Russia started to grow. So Kirchner had the policy of looking east in the very similar way that Chavez also did.
And then I think from there it talks us about Christina and her legacy. Yeah, go ahead.
Christina's legacy still exists because she is still there and people can see. Mm, though after Nestor had been able to stabilize Argentina and to take it back to a place where IMF would actually go back begging that you can draw our things, you can have your special drawing rights, and you can have all your money that you had here. So after that point of time, uh, Cristina Fernandez, when she was elected, she got into a state much more stable, and she could, I would say, focus on many other things that her husband could not. So, for example, her biggest legacy was the uh, mm, I would say the elimination of absolute poverty from Argentina. That happened in 2012. It was recognized by the United Nations. The United Nations also gave it money for its projects because of this. The UNDP, the UN Development Program, gave it money for this. So the absolute poverty, if you look at Argentina now, you will think what happened. But in 2012, absolute poverty was eliminated from Argentina. It was zero absolute poverty, and I'd say she was a real. mm, She was a person who took Eva Peron's words to heart that there should be no hungry people. So there was also the elimination of hunger from Argentina. Again in the same 2012. But it was not just this. She also set up many universities, new ones, okay, throughout her time. So education was important. So that and everywhere, like she set up a University of Argentina, the Antarctic University in Ushuaia in the Argentinian Antarctic. She set up university in the most
I find it interesting that Argentina is so obsessed with its Arctic Arctic.
Antarctic legacy. Yeah. So
Interesting, but yeah,
it,
continue.
and she also established another university in the poorest region of the Buenos Aires suburb in the west. I think it's called Universidad Nacional del Oeste. And then, in case of schools, like there was a project called Conectar Igualdad, giving free internet to schools and all schools. So until that, it wasn't there. It was only private schools, private institutions that could provide this thing. But by that time, Argentinian state had the money, the resources, and also the will, because the political will is very important. So Conectar Igualdad would provide internet connections to every school in a country where a company like Clarin owns broadband. So it's not like she's like, oh, if Clarin does not want to provide anything, we don't care. We will provide it. The state will do it. So she also started the construction of a nuclear power station in conjunction with China. It is there in some western province, I forget its name, but there is also in the center of Argentina also.
And why is
So
that good? And why is that good, despite criticisms we have towards the use of nuclear energy and whatnot?
better to use it for energy than weapons to do thing. But anyway, so uh,
Okay, yep, yep, good. Very,
no,
very fair arguments.
no, Argentina was trying to diverse its energy field because yes, it has gas, and it was Cristina also who started the first exploration in the gas fields in Vaca Muerta in the south. Mm, uh, for that, it was importing from Bolivia. So Argentina has a lot of resources, but the problem is the exploration and the use of that resource. So that was essential. It also has thorium, so it can use it to do its own nuclear energy. It did not have the technology. Nobody was giving it technology. If China gives, then why not? So I mean, Argentina tried to diverse its electricity field. It tried to diverse many of its fields. Not everything was possible. We can say that. I mean, she recognizes that she failed to change the de facto dollarization of the country. She recognizes that she could not reform the judiciary, and that is coming to bite her back. Um, there is also the issue of the autonomy of Buenos Aires city, which is also a big problem. So this could not be solved. The capital
What,
flight could not totally be
but
stopped.
also, what's that other part of Argentina, which very powerful state, almost a state within the states? I think it's Patagonia. I could be wrong, but I think it's
Patagonia. Patagonia is not a state, it's a region, yes. So Patagonia is very important because it is the place where you have the railways. Then you also had a lot of rebellion in Patagonia throughout all this time. Patagonia for a long time was sort of ignored. And then mm, it was there in case of it is in Vaca Muerta is there. I mean the gas field is there. It has a lot of gas. It has what is it called, lithium, all these things. So these were the things that the Argentinian state under Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner started to develop. I mean, industrial development sort of restarted, was relaunched with her, because until that time, the entire Argentina was very destabilized. You need a stable state, a stable country in order to start this, what is it called, industrialization. So I would say that that was also a legacy. That she also had many cultural legacies. For example, uh, the public television. So until that, in a country where you have Clarín, where you have Telefe, where you have La Nación, all in, I mean, monopolizing the media field, she also developed the Argentinian public television. And Argentinian public television, not as a vague, this is something that also Westerners should understand, that a state television is not bad, essentially, because why is corporate television good? So state media is not bad. Secondly, corporate television would not, if a state is doing something good, I don't think corporate TV would say anything about it, right? So that is why they would only talk about her shoe collection. But but the Argentinian public TV, in fact, Argentinian public TV would inform people about the bonuses that they might get at some point of time. Other television were not reporting about it. They were having the public space, they were having the media space, but they were not reporting on what bonus, what economic benefits, financial benefits that a person can get from a state. That should get any sort of scholarship, any sort of economic help to anyone, to the small industries, for example, and also culture. I mean, cultural programs, they were all all cultural programs were either transmitted live or transmitted later through the television, public television. And good cultural programs, I'm not talking about TV serials or something. Okay, so if there was for example, if someone was giving a concert at a place, the television will record it. Argentinian state would record it and would later play it on TV so that people can see free of cost. So this program was called Igualdad Cultural, and it also brought many artists to Argentina to perform free of charge. I mean, they would not take money from the people. It was the state that will pay them. Similarly, books were given for free to all libraries. Many libraries were created. Education was important. Culture was important, and she still talks about the importance of culture and education to this
Would
day.
love I would love to actually meet her in person and talk about education with her, because
It will.
I find it quite inspiring. And ugh, if
It's
only
actually true.
if only I spoke Spanish, I probably would have tried to get into some of those Argentinian youth.
I think she speaks English, but yeah, she does. But yeah, I mean, her education programs were so important and so famous, and also not just famous and important, they were also very effective. That the current president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, when at her inauguration, Cristina Fernandez visited. They talked about education, and Sheinbaum has said that she will take some advice, etc., from her and from her education minister, etc., so that in order to develop the Mexican programs.
The next couple of questions I have to sort of combine them because we're
You've
already
been asking too many.
because I think we're already nearing the nearing the 2 hour mark, so I have to combine a lot of my next questions into one, which is talk to us now. How is it, given all these positive things that Nestor did, and he also sadly passed away from the demon disease that is cancer. And then Christina champions a lot of his legacies and also her own, she champions a lot of her good
Developing.
left policies. So how is it, given that they've ended austerity, given that they've given some kind of sovereignty back to Argentina, a lot of their policies, I know they're benefiting the working class. I know they're benefiting the destitute poor. And I know they're benefiting what I often call the precarious middle class. So, but then why is it? Why is it that Macri was able to get into power? This was the right wing bootlicker, lover of Milton Friedman, lover of the Washington Consensus. How was it that he was able to get into power, return Argentina back to austerity because he claims we have to pay this odious debt, which is actually Washington's crooked banks. So, talk to us about all of that, and then the return of the left in power, but how even with the return of the left in power after Macri, we get yours truly, Milei, and then so talk to us about all of these very weird political dynamics that's happening to Argentina.
Well, this is a vicious cycle that Argentina lives. Oh, every time, you know, like it's either through a military coup that the left policies will be reversed, or it will be through a democratic means, supposedly democratic means. But today, today you don't even need a military coup in Latin America in most countries. You can the right can come back through so-called democratic means. And in case of Christina, I would say that it's not just for Christina, but for most of us in most parts of the world, is that we lose on the propaganda war. We lose it. We lose it
Ah, okay, yeah.
severely. We lose it. We lose it by many goals. You know. So in
So
case
like
of
like Lula, like Chavez, like AMLO, both Nestor and Christina never got really the popular support of the Argentine press,
no, no,
print
no,
press, like
they never got.
newspapers, magazines, and even the corporate press on television.
No, no, the corporate press will not support any government that strays away from corporate policies more or less. So they never got. I mean, none of these people, none of the persons that you named ever got corporate press. In fact, it was, I think Chavez would always say that if the corporate press was praising him, then there must have been some problem. Because just remember, like corporate press was so involved in the coup against him in 2002. I mean, they wanted to remove him. They were rejoicing when he was removed. Not only that, they have spread a lot of fake news uh, during the coup. Mm. But anyway, we'll talk about Argentina. And the thing is that she never got good press at all. You know it from your friend in Argentinian friend, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. What they have is bad press. And bad press about anything. Even if something does not exist, the press will create it and then slap it on her and say that she has committed that. So, uh, yeah,
And
if you have.
that's where the nonsense that that you get from left leaning folks or left wing or sincere leftist folks, that they're just as corrupt as Menem was, or they're just as corrupt as Fernando was, and or oh, awful our choices are between a Milei over here or a Cristina over there. Is that where all of that nonsense comes from?
Probably. Yes, actually, yes. So it's from the propaganda war that all this nonsense comes from. Now, just remember that in 2014, you had a global economic downturn. You know, the loss of oil prices, the fall of oil prices. Now, any country that has an economy that depends on oil will be impacted by it. Argentina depends on oil and gas exports to a large extent. So does Brazil, so does Venezuela. In 2014, in Mexico, in 2014, all of these countries were impacted. Now, why nothing happened in Mexico? Because there was a very right-wing person, Enrique Peña Nieto, who was a US darling, so nobody was, press was not against him. But in case of all these other countries, Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina, 2014 was very difficult. You suddenly have a sharp fall in your economy. And it is at this time, I mean, press was always there. Press was always saying that Christina steals money, Christina enriches herself and her friends, that I mean, she is basically a thief. They call her chora. Chora means thief. So they call her. The problem is this, that if she were a thief, then all the things that she did could not have been possible. Okay? I mean, it would have been impossible to eliminate hunger. It would have been impossible to eliminate extreme poverty if a government steals. But you don't have to think about it. If a lie is repeated a million times, then it will be in your mind. It will come to your mind as a truth. It will become encrusted in your mind as truth. That happened is that was always there in 2013-14. Media just saw its chance and it took it. And it was incessant. Now, it was at this time exactly that Cristina Fernandez tried to bring, she saw the problem. She saw what was happening. She's not a fool. So she saw and she tried to bring a law of media. And at that time, it was a very, I'd say, a very necessary law. It still remains a necessary law for any country. So the law of media was that the media space would be divided into three parts, three equal parts. One would be private media, one part would be state media, and the other would be independent, alternative, etc.
But
Of course, she did not
it was depicted as her harassing poor little
press
Clairol and her going after the
Clarin.
freedom the freedom of the press and
Yes,
stuff
yes,
like
yes.
that.
I'm sure you remember this, or you can imagine it. So yes, it
Oh,
was.
that's how it was reported on Al Jazeera, which far too many left leaning folks think of as a sacred safe space for us lefties and anti imperialists. Which
Well, yes, it is a big problem also because mm, the Argentinian state media also had an agreement with Al Jazeera, and you see it stabbing you in the back. So that's it. So anyway, it's that she brought that law. Of course, it was presented as a freedom of you know, attack on freedom of the press, freedom of expression, etc. It could not pass through the Congress and Senate, so it did not become a law. She is not an all-powerful person. She could not make it into a law. I mean, people should keep it in mind when they think, okay, she is a dictator. She wasn't. If she were, she would have made it into a law. She wasn't, so she could
pity
not.
she's not a dictator.
And and another thing that she recognizes to this day is that she could not change the flight of capital. I mean, she could not stop the flight of capital from Argentina. That in 2014, that had a big impact on Argentinian economy because it's not a planned economy, it's not a state-controlled economy. So when capital is fleeing, the state cannot do anything. So that was something that they could not do. So these factors impacted together. The economy deteriorated sharply in 2 years. Like in 2012, you had elimination of extreme poverty. By 2014, it was back because the Argentinian peso was so devalued that people's savings turned into nothing. Okay, so it was not hyperinflation, but it was a huge inflation. And of course, it's in such a situation, if you do not have the tools, propaganda tools for you, and if you cannot show that yes, I have done these things, and it was which was my government who eliminated extreme poverty, and it is because of this reason that it is back. It's not because I stole money. If you cannot show this, then you can suffer the fate that she suffered.
So then, so then so this is very important to understand how Macri gets into
Came to
power,
power. Yeah.
because I'm going to assume, not having watched Argentinian presidential debates on corporate media, that it's very much like the awful train wrecks we're subjected to in the West when Britain chooses their prime minister, when America chooses its president, or whatever country. But it's so dumbed down. It's so fact free, even, that a lot of times when you are a leftist, so if you are a Christina Kirchner, or you are a Hugo Chavez, and you participate in these ridiculous presidential debates, which are all modeled on like CNN, ABC, and corporate media in the U.S., are you a lot of the times are you a lot of the times, are you sort of like on trial, where you have to explain to people, this is what my government did, you may not know this, but we actually did do that? Or
Okay.
it goes through
Thankfully.
it goes through people's heads, because unless you have your stupid one-liners that like lands good with an audience, it just goes through people's minds. Or
Thankfully, there are no televised presidential debates in Venezuela. Thankfully. Yes, because who is going to sit through, for example, I'm just saying, who is going to sit through if Guaido ever became candidate? Who is going to sit through him and tolerate him speaking, first of all? And secondly, that no, though, in fact, media is not allowed to hold presidential debate in Venezuela. You know, all the candidates, they will just go to people, they will directly talk to the people, they will just do their canvassing, leafleting, campaigning, whatever, and that's it. That's But in case of Argentina, mainstream press is the strongest press, so it does hold debates. Now, I did not watch presidential debates in 2014. I didn't. I was in university just studying and trying to pass my bachelor's course. But anyway, but I watched the ones with Milei and Sergio Massa in 2023. And I would say that I wasn't impressed, but that's a different thing. The problem is this, that in a presidential debate, the questions are not like they're chosen by a committee or something. They're chosen by the press, the media that is holding the debate, right? So it would be Clarín, it would be Telefe, whoever is holding the debate, they will just choose the questions. And why would they choose questions of what good you have done? They would just go on asking you about, okay, this is the case against you, or there is a case against you, or do you know that people do not like your policy of, for example, marriage equality, which Christina also passed. So they'll just talk about this sort of thing. Then they won't focus on, the economic issues, or the elimination of extreme poverty, or the devaluation of the Argentinian peso because of the meltdown of the global economy in 2014. Why would they focus on these things? That will give Christina a good price. So they do not want to give her good price. That is what I would imagine. But anyway, what I am going to say is
that's
exactly
fascinating,
that
fascinating.
they would, not only this time, not just in 2014, it's always that the press would try to impress on you that if you fall out with the US, then you are going to be in a very dire situation because Venezuela. And this has been this has been the presidential debate, this has been the presidential campaign, all sorts of things starting from 2015. Okay, so, or maybe after 2016, after the Venezuelan sanctions became severe, it's always only one thing. You are going to this 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 policy that you are proposing, the US won't like it. The US would sanction the country, and this country will become Venezuela. And that is the debate all the time. I mean, it's even worse than the debate that you might see in Britain. I mean, the British press or the US press before the elections of their heads of states and government. It's terribly worse, million times worse than that in Peru, in Argentina, in Mexico. It was same in Mexico. They're saying the US is going to sanction us. The US is going to expel us from the free trade agreement, and we are going to become Venezuela. And that's Venezuela. The boogeyman is now fills all media space everywhere.
And so then we get Macri, who says, "I'm going to pay the odious debts of the crooked banksters." He of course reintroduces austerity. It does not go down with the Argentine public, and then he gets voted out. Cristina returns into power, but under VP, vice president. But the lawfare was already, as you've described, the lawfare was already beginning against her, and now Alberto Fernandes, was that his name? So how do you explain him not being able to maintain power and the rise of
Milei.
Milei? And my only follow-up question to that, as we start to wrap up, is how are Argentinians faring under Milei and his idlibism, ideolibertarianism, or idneolibism, which is idiot neoliberal libertarianism, neoliberalism.
Okay, so first of all, yes, Macri brought back IMF. Macri took the largest loan in IMF's history, not just in Argentina's history, in IMF's history. And I think I have discussed about this in a previous show here. I think Jesus was there, probably Joe Emersberger was also here. But anyway, so I am not going into the illegalities of that debt. I have talked about it to death, I believe. But anyway, so basically, he took loans from the IMF, and he said that he was going to do something about the economy, etc. A single penny did not go to the economy. It was again the flight of capitals. His friends, he is a businessman, remember. He is a businessman. His brother is a businessman. His cousins are business people. Everybody is a business. He actually belonged to a mafia family, really, in Italy. So, yes, his family in Italy was a mafia. But so he maintains the family name, as we say. But anyway, so his friends just took this capital away from the country to hide it in tax havens. So the loan accumulated. He could not pay it back. And he tried to get another, but IMF would not give it. Trump was there trying to force IMF to give it, but finally it did not happen, thankfully. So yes, Macri was booted out of power. Definitely, he destroyed the country. So people did see that when they elected Macri, when they fell to propaganda and elected Macri, the opposition candidate, the candidate from Peronismo, wasn't very inspiring either, I should say, but at least there were other people who could have kept him in line, and they could have continued Cristina's policies, could have. But Macri destroyed the country. So when Alberto Fernandes comes in 2019, remember in December 2019, he gets a devastated country. Of course, he had promised that he would not pay back the. Oh, he did not say he would not pay back. He would say he would renegotiate, that it was an odious debt, that he would not take more loans from IMF, etc. The problem that happened, I mean, it's not like Alberto Fernandez has all the faults. The thing is that from February 2020, you have the pandemic. So Alberto Fernandez comes to the presidency on 10th December, and by the middle of February, Argentina is shut down. So Argentina is one of the countries that was first impacted in Latin America from COVID, including COVID deaths. So there is a lot of travel between Europe and Argentina. And with the return of Peronismo, a lot of Argentinians who had fled to Europe were returning to Argentina, and they took the virus with them. So Argentina became the first country where the virus was detected in Latin America, and also people died. So Argentina closed down by the middle end of February. And this lockdown would be extended throughout 2020 and late into 2021. So 2 years of Alberto Fernandez's government was just submerged, immersed, trying to fight against the COVID pandemic and its associated economic impact. Because when you are shutting down economy, we all saw what happened. And Argentina was already a destroyed economy. So in that
And he couldn't,
situation,
and he couldn't be too generous with the people. He couldn't be too generous with the people's bailout because of the IMF straitjackets.
yes. So he could not do that. Yes, Argentinian state did not have money. That is something. The Argentinian state had no money. It did not even have money to dredge the Paraná River. So it could not do anything. I mean, it had no money for anything. It still had one thing, the swap agreement with China. So with the food, it was getting money. Easy. But the thing is this, that in case of the IMF loan, you would have to pay it back in dollars. You cannot pay it back in any other currency. You can, it was not, at that time, it was not accepting Chinese currency. It later did. So Argentinian state had to fall back on whatever foreign resources it had to pay back the IMF loan. And it was at that time that in late 2020, that on the 2022, that this question came up, whether to pay or not to pay. And because the one of the deadlines was ending, I think, so he had to decide whether to pay or not to pay. Of course, most of the left was against paying. They were for renegotiation. And even Rafael Correa advised him for renegotiation, something that he had also done in Ecuador when he became the president. So the problem is this, that Alberto Fernandez, with his then economy minister, who is also, remember, he was a student of Milton Friedman. He was a student of that school. Okay, he was from the Chicago School of Economics. So that minister, that economy minister, had advised Alberto Fernandez against defaulting and also against any renegotiation. And it was, in fact,
Ridiculous.
at that time, there was a big tension. Everybody know about it. There was a huge tension between Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Fernandez about this thing, about whether to what to do with the IMF loan. But finally, for the sake of maintaining, again, for the sake of maintaining unity of the government and not letting the government fall, Cristina Fernandez, I think she just admitted defeat. She went out of it, and Argentina
Well,
again
she
took an
also
IMF loan.
she also she couldn't mount even a leadership bid against Alberto because
No, no, no.
because she was fat because she was barred. She's actually barred from running for office ever
She
again.
was and still is. Yes, she's barred from office forever. So yes, at the time she was barred in that in one of the cases, and not even that. I mean, are you going to fight against your own colleague in your own party? I don't think so. And not even
Exactly.
own party. Alberto is the president. You are the
By the
vice
way, I'm
president.
still here. I just need to shut my video really quickly. By I am still here. So continue. So
Yes,
continue.
yes, definitely, definitely, no problem. So it's that Alberto is the president. She is the vice president. Are you going to fight? I mean, is the president and vice president going to fight publicly over a loan? Yes, it was a loan worth fighting over, but Cristina Fernandez admitted defeat. She could not do anything. The Argentinian state recognized that loan, did not renegotiate, did not de-recognize. It simply recognized that loan. Again, took an IMF loan to pay back the loan. That is so crazy. And this is something that Alberto himself had described as drinking in order to cure drunkenness, something like that, in 2019 before he was elected. He did the thing. So a drunk was drinking again. And this was something that destroyed any sort of faith in the left from most of the left. And if you talk about Milei, he's not an outsider. It's not like he originated as some sort of messiah. to solve all these problems. He did not even, I mean, he says that he is an economist, but I don't think he knows anything about economics in the first place. So what he did was that he is a creation. I would say he is a media creation, and his creation started in 2018, if not early. So it was again Clarin, it is again all this big media, but also transnational media, including X, now Twitter, including social media, the social media moguls, let's say. So he is a creation of media. He's very similar to Enrique Peña Nieto in this sense, Enrique Peña Nieto being the former president of Mexico. So he was created by media starting from 2018 as an economist who was talking about what is wrong with Macri. Yes, he initially started with what is wrong with macroeconomics, but then he would come and start trashing Peronismo, and from 2020, when he would really start trashing Peronismo, that he would start becoming more visible. He would start becoming more quote unquote popular. He wasn't popular. He was made popular. He was made popular by media. He was all this media that I talked about that had gained even more power during Macri. And that had gained even more power during Alberto because he could not do anything about he did not bring back that media law, and that media law also needs change because it was proposed in 2013. We are in 2024. Alberto was thinking about it in 2021. So 10 years had gone by then, even more time now. So we have to change that media law, I'm sure. But Alberto did not do anything about it. I don't think he had anything to do. He could do nothing. He had two things on his hand, and well, he did not fail in the pandemic, but he definitely failed in the economy front.
And
And
also
then,
and also just wasn't the greatest communicator in the world. And
mm,
let's face it, you can be the best leftist with all the best ideas and all the best policy stuff. If you're not a good communicator, yeah, it's all you can do is throw the person like a life jacket, get them out of the water, and get somebody who's a much better speaker. And like,
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
if you look at Brits and for example, who was the one guy? There was the guy before Neil Kinnock, who was leader of the Labour Party. Michael Foots, Michael Foots, I believe was his name. Uh, Great left
Yes,
wing
yes, it is.
policies, but terrible communicator. And if you have him up against a Margaret Thatcher, I can tell you, Margaret Thatcher, even if you don't like the
Trash.
win, is just going to blow him. It's just going to blow him out of the water. And I think so. Was that what was wrong also with Alberto Fernandes, was that he just wasn't that great of a communicator.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't a communicator. And when you are not a communicator and you don't have a press behind you, then it's very difficult. So
Exactly.
he did not have the press, and he was a terrible communicator. So whatever he did, and then he of course failed in the economy field. That's a very terrible failure. Okay. So I won't say that he had all the fault, but he had some fault. He could not stand up to the IMF. Now, in a country where Nestor Kirchner had stood up to the IMF, where Cristina Fernandez had stood up to the vulture funds, um, so if Peronismo, you were expecting that thing, the same thing from Peronismo, right? That yes, he will also stand up to the IMF. He will also do something about this, but he did not. And then Christina was barred, not only barred, I mean, somebody tried to kill her, right? There was an assassination attempt on her, and it was only God's hand that prevented it, that shot did not go because she was pointed directly in her head. So it was in such a situation, like in such a situation, you could see that image actually became a sort of a failure instead of uh, instead of instead of generating sympathy, it became the image of failure of Peronismo, that somebody tried to kill the vice president and the president could do nothing about it. And it was in this, I mean, he did not inspire. He did not inspire a lot of neither loyalty nor anything.
Bolsonaro, whatever people want to call him. I just find it's amazing, but I don't know. Well, I just find it's amazing that a guy, I mean, he literally, his whole campaign is I'm going to bring back all the things that got us into this economic mess, whatever little sovereignty we have. In fact, I'm going to give it up even more by making the dollar our currency and so forth like that. And
Mm,
but how do how do you explain the electorate voting for
such
somebody
a
like,
person.
yeah, now how do you explain an electorate voting for somebody like him, or is it, or does it not really matter, or is it really just that he managed to get his folks to come out and vote, just like, look, just like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump managed to get his base to come out and vote for him, and there's nothing much you can do about it. You can have however many newspapers say don't vote for this guy, or however many newspapers take a neutral position, which I still think de facto you do support Donald Trump. Like is that the only way we can explain somebody like Milei getting into power?
Well, in case of Milei, he had all the media behind him. So
Okay.
it's not like the media was trash. Media created him from 2018. So he had a media backing from a very long time. It's not, we do not see it, but it was there. And he was the one who appeared in media talking about economics. They were not inviting Christina to talk about economics. They were not inviting Amadou Bodo. Amadou Bodo was in prison, so they were not talking about this. They were not inviting these people to talk about economics. They were inviting Milei to talk about economics, and he was proposing a third way. Can you imagine? So you're saying that all these people who have governed the country for so long, people like Macri from the right, and people like Christina from the left, they are both failures. They have both failed. And I am the third way out. I am libertarian. I would not do any of these things that you do. And when these people have failed to solve your problems, you will choose the candidate. You might think of giving the third way candidate a chance. And that was what took him to the second place in the first round in that election. So the of course, in case of Peronismo, it was also a big fault. Like 5 million people did not vote. 5 million people did not. In Argentina, voting is compulsory. And in a country like that, I mean, of course, nobody is going to take away your jobs if you don't vote. But in a country where voting is compulsory, people just feel like going to vote. And so in Argentina, the bulk of the people who did not vote in 2023 surely belonged to Peronismo or who supported Peronismo, who would have voted for Peronismo had it had a more inspiring candidate. Instead, it had Sergio Massa, a speculator, somebody who worked with vulture funds, and he went back to Greylock Capital. He works at the Greylock Capital now, which is a vulture fund that once took Argentina to arbitration tribunals. So if you have a candidate like this, in supposedly from the left, well, the right may not have memories, but the left is more educated. The left has memories. The left studies. Why would you think of voting for a person like this who would also be not much different from Akari, let's say? So that was a big
That's,
problem.
well, fascinating, and unfortunately, now we're not. I'm not going to ask any more questions about how Malay is faring, but sometime next year, let's definitely do a show. A show about how Malay is
I can
faring.
just give you a very little indications. It is that if extreme poverty is back in Argentina and back with a vengeance. Now 52% of the Argentinian population is below poverty line, and it's even worse that 66% of the children of minors are below poverty line. So that is how libertarian economics is faring. Argentina has a higher inflation rate than Venezuela, and Venezuela has 936 unilateral coercive measures imposed by the US, the European Union, IMF, various Japan, I can't name all of them. Argentina has not a single economic sanction measure, and yet its inflation, interannual inflation, month to month inflation, everything is higher than in Venezuela. Its poverty is also higher than in Venezuela, although Bolivar, the Venezuelan currency, is sanctioned. So it has no value in the international market. Argentinian peso still has, but you can imagine. And uh, if we are talking about any other things, well, he is just, Milei is just, you have seen, he just flew to Miami to meet Trump. He is such a servant. His government has signed a terrible agreement regarding Malvinas with Britain, giving Britain even more control of Malvinas that it already has, allowing it to fly planes from Argentina. Okay. And it also, Milei also dismissed his foreign minister because she had voted against the Cuba blockade at the United Nations. So that is Milei's legacy until now.
And he's also a rabid douchebag Zionist.
Oh, yeah. He is a Zionist. He supports the Zionist entity taking over all of Middle East. Wants to transfer the capital. Sorry, he's transferred he transferred the embassy of Argentina from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem against international law, and he also wants to give the entity a place. A land in Patagonia that you mentioned.
Yes, and there actually is a huge Israel lobby there. Whitney Webb did a
Oh,
very interesting
yes, yes.
investigation into the Argentine Israel lobby and the Jewish Zionist movement in Argentina, which I'll try to link if I can find the article.
Yes.
I think my last two questions are the following. Uh, yeah. So my last two questions are this, and I think you can combine the two. So I'll just read them out. What does the history of Argentina teach us leftists and orthodox Marxists, about the actions and the role of the middle class / the bourgeoisie? And doesn't Juan Peron and his third wave, which he strongly advocated, in which different factions of his party, the Judicialist Party, the center left, the far right, even further economic right, that both a broad church party like that and trying to please so many different socioeconomic backgrounds, isn't that a failed policy and failure political strategy? Because ultimately, in a place like Argentina, where there's an endless class war between the working class and the precarious middle class, they have everything to gain and nothing to lose in eradicating capitalism. But the affluent bourgeoisie, the rich, the super rich, and their thuggish goons have everything to lose, even though under any system of socialism or any system which has socialist policies, the rich always fare well. And I'm curious your response to that when we study a place like Argentina.
Okay, so first of all, we'll start with this part of the Justicialista. The party has changed, of course. The party no longer tries to please everyone. With Nestor Kirchner, it actually became more left, and it is still there. It's not trying to please everyone. It Now it defines itself as, well, it does not define itself as anything, but its policies, pardon, its policy papers, its all these things would tell you that it is a party of the left. Maybe not a lot left. Maybe it's not, does not call itself socialist. Also, all these things, but it has socialist policies. It has um, applied socialist policies in the past with varying degrees of success. So I'd say that if the party has changed, it is not trying to please everybody. Secondly, Peronismo and the party are different in the sense that Peronismo also has unions in it. It has large trade unions. Argentina has many large trade unions. Unfortunately, they are also divided on many things. And there is what is called, I don't think it is called the aristocratic working class. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that there is a union aristocracy like in the US, but there are people who feel more comfortable in their positions, and the unions also are failing to see something, but it's not a failure of only Argentinian unions, it's a failure, or rather, I would say a challenge to trade unions in general, is that informalization of work has increased so much. In fact, we are also informal workers in a sense. We are not unionized. We do our own work. And it's the same in case of Argentina, that almost like, I think, more than 30% is informalization is more than 30%. So people mm, who take,
Zero-hour
who
contracts,
do
bounce
home
from internship
delivery,
to internship, or just are very much
internships.
self-employed, and they just don't know when their next paycheck comes.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
delivery workers,
Delivery people,
stuff like
yes,
that.
yes, that sort of people, delivery people, warehouse workers in warehouses, etc. And in many cases, they also are part of transnationals like Amazon, which does not allow unionization. So in these sort of cases, what can the unions do? What are the forms of work in the 21st century? This is something that unions have to think, not only in Argentina but everywhere in the world. I suppose that is something that Peronismo as the movement has to do. Um, so I don't think it is a failure. I mean, we have come a long way from Peron's policy. So Peronismo, the name is there and many policies are there, but many have changed. The world has changed from Peron in the last 70, 80 years. Um, and then if we're talking about the middle class, I know it's your favorite question. You have always asked me that what happens that the middle class, which actually rises from poverty because of because precisely because of socialist policies of some governments, and then they get good jobs, and then they try to climb the social ladder even more and try to become like the bourgeoisie that would like to get rid of them. So it's sort of like committing suicide, class suicide sort of thing that the middle class commits. It's a problem that we have seen everywhere. I don't know what is the answer, what is the solution to that. I really don't know, because uh, in
Well,
case of,
we well
especially
we know what our Marxist Leninist Stalinist friends would do, but
it's
yeah,
especially
I want to try not to go down that violent route, but
it's especially a huge problem in countries like Argentina. The middle class originated because of, especially because of Cristina Fernandes's government. A lot of the middle class, they originated from, that is why it's precarious, because with the devaluation of currencies, their life standards of living also fall. It's normal in every country. With inflation, with devaluation, you will have that problem. It also happened in Venezuela. There are other things involved still. uh, it is that when the middle class, this precarious middle class, starts to feel that they're more comfortable, they just turn more rightward and think, okay, yeah, did you, this is a sort of loss of collective memory, as I call it. It's a loss of collective memory for the class, collective class memory that we go on losing. And then when we find ourselves, when we vote for the right wing, and then we find ourselves in a terrible place, and then we'll think, what happened, what went wrong? And again, these people then, I mean, this middle class then goes back to blaming the poor for having voted for the right wing, when you would find, especially in Argentina, the 5 million people who did not vote were mostly poor people. They did not see themselves reflected in the candidate that Peronismo, the left, was putting as its face. So I would say that it is a sort of class suicide that the middle class commits all the time. And it's high time that it stopped committing, but I don't know how to solve it. It's not my place to tell you anything about it or tell anyone anything about it. I hope that the people in politics, the people in unions, uh, they come up with something. They have to. I mean, they have to refound themselves. They have to rejuvenate themselves, and they have to understand that the world is changing fast, and then they need to change with it, or it will be the right that will come and fill in the power vacuum as it has happened in Argentina.
well, on that note, I think that's the perfect place to end. But it is a subject we are definitely going to return to, because I think that problem of the middle class and how you can't just lump them all as affluent bourgeoisie, I think is a subject that does need to be studied, and I think the left does need to figure out, okay, how do we get these people from stop like committing like class warfare on us, because in many ways it's like the complaints we say about liberals, how the liberals are fascists with like better table manners, and while they talk a whole game about helping us all, a lot of the times they're the more effective evil. And in terms of Argentina, it's definitely a subject we're definitely going to be revisiting, because I know under Milei there is a lot of resistance to his austerity on steroids. But this is a perfect place to close. So I want to thank my guest Saheli Chowdhury of Orinoco Tribune for giving us a very good history of Argentina, and I also want to remind folks to please subscribe to Orinoco Tribune and donate generously to Orinoco Tribune if you can, and the same for One Plus One. And Saheli, anything to say before we close?
No need to thank you for this place. I mean, it's time that we should probably start our show together because I have been here so many times. Anyway, because it is, we try to be visible everywhere, and we try to take advantage of any opportunity that we get to be visible, because a media war is a front in the hybrid war, and we cannot lose it wherever we are, wherever we anti-imperialists are. So I would ask people who are followers of One Plus One to see, to go to the Orinoco Tribune website. It's simply orinocotribune.com, so you can easily find it. And we are also as Orinoco Tribune in Facebook, in X, in Instagram, in Telegram, in we have a WhatsApp channel. We are also there on Reddit. What else is? I mean, whatever social media,
Everywhere and anywhere.
whatever social media you can imagine, it's there. I am also on Facebook, so you know me there, I suppose. So if I try to post a lot of things, not just Orinoco Tribune, but things that we even do not post on Orinoco Tribune. And all our people are also all the time trying to remain active in all media spaces. So yes, please visit Orinoco Tribune and donate to us also, because we do not have the backing of the US empire.
All right. Until then, and in light of very recent events to the Syrian Arab Republic and to the people of Syria, power to the people, death to Western imperialism, settler colonialism, Zionism, and so forth. And we will be doing and I will be doing a show in the future about Syria. But until then, I can only recommend that people check out my playlist on all things Lebanon and Syria. And anti-imperialist folks, we're not, our best is not good enough, so we need to step up our game in the fight against the unjust world that is capitalism and imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And again, just want to thank Saheli for coming here to explain all things Argentina. And knowing the Argentinians, I know for a fact they will definitely be rising up again against Milei, and he will not be there forever and ever. So, yes, peace until then, folks.